Chapter 1229. At the meeting, Dean only put forward the idea of reform. He didn't announce the specific policies and treaties immediately. Although the people believed in him, it would inevitably cause unnecessary chaos if he changed people's living habits too quickly. Recovering the Federation was the first step. The significance of the Federation for him was just a stepping stone to rule the Empire and the Fire Dragon country. After he integrated the human forces, it meant that he would master the most powerful force and the richest resources in the world. At that time, even if he couldn't find a way to solve the undeads in the past, he could pour all the resources for related research in the future. As the leader of the old era, he subconsciously believed that technology was omnipotent. If it wasn't, it could only mean that the level of technology was too low. After the meeting, the whole Federation was like a huge machine running at full speed. The injuries and grassroots construction were handed over to the officials. Dean called the 4 consortiums for a separate meeting. The real upper-class group of the Federation was still the 4 consortiums. Most of the power was in their hands, including the policy direction of the old Federation. Of course, this interference was all part of Lin Chongqing's plan to make them think so. In reality, everything was under Lin Chongqing's control through the Terrace Financial Group. Integrating the power of the 4 consortiums and unified management was the first step to change the federal system to a centralized dynasty system. The power of the federal system was too loose. Most of it was in the hands of the 4 consortiums. What Dean wanted to do was to take back the power in their hands and give them the corresponding rights. Obviously, this was by no means superfluous. Doubts, resistance, and other discordant voices were suppressed by Dean's violent means. The 4 consortiums were sitting in the clouds, overlooking hundreds of millions of people. In front of Dean, they were like sheep in the eyes of a tiger. They had no ability to resist. All the actions of Dean would inevitably lead to damage to the interests of some people. It would also lead to the tragic death of countless people. But these are not exposed to the public. The people were trying to get used to the new policies and order brought by the new god. What was order? It was the rules set by the superior for the inferior. Overall, Dean's rules were quite loose for the people. After all, the establishment of a new dynasty needed to please the people in the early stage to facilitate management. Once the situation was stable, there would be squeezing and corruption. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. The pain in the various cities of the Federation had gradually been healed. Some hidden in the dark had already scabbed. The people enjoyed a lot of post-disaster benefits, and they were even more in awe, love, and respect for this new god. However, in the upper class, after half a month of iron and blood punishment, everyone was terrified of this god. Whenever they saw people kneeling and praying in front of the statues of Dean and Goddess Wan the News, they would sigh bitterly in their hearts. This was not a god, but a cruel and hypocritical devil. After half a month of consolidation, Dean felt that the Federation had gradually stabilized. All the unstable factors had been removed in this half a month. In this process, Lin Chongqing's memory once again helped him a lot. Lin Chongqing had a very good understanding of the 4 consortiums, military generals, and federal officials. Lin Chongqing knew all of their private secrets. Dudian easily made them disarm and surrender. Now the mechanical heart is in my body, and the intelligence of the Federation's brain has been restored. I can no longer control the brain to monitor the entire Federation. I have to train a group of loyal subordinates to manage the country in the future. Dean thought of Noyce and the others who were far away in the Empire. There was a trace of nostalgia in his heart. He immediately called Jay Slitty. You will be in charge of the matters here for the time being. Perform well, and maybe I will give you a good seat in the future when I ascend the throne. Jay Slitty was happy. These days he found that Dean didn't target him because he was a loyal servant of Lin Chongqing. It seemed that Dean didn't care about the former enmity. Dean's character was cruel, but he was broad-minded. In the beginning, he didn't want to be a puppet. He wanted to get rid of Lin Chongqing's control. Now that Lin Chongqing was dead, although he thought about rebelling against Dean, he found that Dean was more difficult to deal with than Lin Chongqing. Since he couldn't oppose Dean, he might as well surrender. Even if he had to submit to Dean, he would still have a high position. It would be much better than the people in the world. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will do my best. Jacelity curiously asked, Your Majesty, did you say in the future? Are you not going to ascend the throne now? I will ascend the throne after I wipe out the demon race and the fire dragon country. Dean indifferently said, What's the point of being the ruler of a country? Don't worry. I won't wait for too long. It will take at most half a year. With his current strength, it would only take a few days to wipe out the Empire and the fire dragon country. The reason why he said half a year was to give the residents time to adapt. He didn't want to waste his people's power after the merger. Ruler of the world? Jacelity's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Dean's heart to be so big. He wanted to conquer the demon race and the fire dragon country. He wanted to be the king of all living beings. However, it was not difficult to understand why Dean would have such an idea. I know, Your Majesty. Jacelity quickly responded. I will go to the demon race and kill the demon emperor. I will be back in a few days. Dean indifferently said, You can leave if there is nothing else. A monstrous wave was set off in Jacelity's heart, but he was very shrewd. Shock flashed on his face as he respectfully excused himself. He knew how terrifying the demon emperor was. Lin Changsheng had mentioned it many times in front of him, but Dean could kill Lin Changsheng, so it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the demon emperor. The sky of this planet is really going to change. Jacelity was shocked and excited as he walked out of the building. He felt that he was going to experience the arrival of a new era, and the master of this era was Dean. Although he wasn't the most dazzling person, but he could enjoy endless wealth and power by following such a person. Dean was ready to leave the Federation. He didn't have too many arrangements. It was very convenient for him to go to the Empire. If the Demon Emperor was in the capital, then he could fly there in the morning and return in the afternoon after killing the Demon Emperor. God, let's go, Dean said to the girl next to him. Chapter 1230. South of the Empire's border, in the sky above the Battle God Wall. The clouds were misty, and there was a gap in the sky above the Battle God Wall. Above the gap, there was a cotton-like sea of clouds. At this moment, many streams of purple light flashed past. They were actually birds with purple lightning coiling around them. They were happily shuttling through the layers of clouds, gathering into dark clouds to feed on the lightning. This was the forbidden area in the sky above the Battle God Wall, and it was guarded by them. At the peak of the clouds, there was a bird master dressed like a priest. His body was as light as a feather, and he sat on the clouds. This was his ability. He could turn his body into the weight of a mayfly, allowing him to shuttle through the world effortlessly. However, his battle prowess was relatively weak. He was a professional thunderbird herder nurtured by the Empire. At this moment, when this birdmaster was half asleep, he suddenly sensed two thunderbirds rushing out from the clouds. They broke away from the flock and flew toward the inner part of the Battle God Wall. He opened his eyes and glanced in that direction. He frowned slightly and took out a specially made whistle to blow it. The flock of thunderbirds in the surroundings stirred and gathered over. However, the two thunderbirds that had broken away from the flock continued to fly away without turning back. Seeing this, the bird master's face darkened. He stopped whistling, and with a flash of his body, he flew out like a transparent soul. His speed was incomparably fast, and he quickly caught up with the two thunderbirds. With a light shout, he raised his hand to capture them. Suddenly, one of the thunderbirds turned its head. Its sharp and long beak shrank, and its furry face turned into a handsome human face. Its expression was incomparably indifferent, and its pitch-black eyes were indifferent to the extreme. It let out a soft snort. The birdmaster couldn't help but be astonished when he saw this change. Before he could say anything, he felt a tremor in his mind, and his consciousness was instantly thrown into chaos. At the next instant, blood flowed out from the birdmaster's mouth, nose, and eyes, covering his entire face like earthworms. It was a horrifying sight. His body also fell limply and floated in the air, becoming a floating corpse. Swoosh! The two thunderbirds didn't even turn their heads and turned to fly away. A few hours later, in the sky above the giant wall, two figures flew over from the faraway horizon, like meteorites falling from the clouds. They whistled past the heads of the guards above the giant wall, causing many guards to exclaim in surprise. Someone immediately reported this scene to the wall lord. Whoosh! When the two of them descended to a height of tens of meters inside the giant wall, they slowly slowed down. The strong wind pressure caused the flowers and grass on the ground to bend. It seemed that even the flowers and grass were kneeling to greet them. Dudian's eyes were like stars as he stood in the air. He released his perception to the fullest. His perception easily covered the entire giant wall. Tens of millions of people appeared in his retinas like countless red spots. Soon he found familiar smells and voices. It was Noyce, Barton, and others. The next moment, Dean flew towards Aurora, who was closest to him. In Flying Snow Town, a cavalry troop was stationed at the entrance of the mayor's house. At this moment, the mayor's house was welcoming a distinguished guest. All the delicacies in town and the mayor's collection of fine wine were served on the table. The mayor personally poured the wine and accompanied the guest. And this distinguished guest was the second daughter of the Stantine family. The Stantine family was an old noble family in Phoenix, Main City. Their territory was extremely large, and Flying Snow Town was just a small town under their business chain. The second daughter of the owner's family passed by, so the mayor had to entertain her warmly. Don't you know that we are tracking the traces of the ferret? The second daughter's name was Avia. She was wearing a set of silver lady's armor. Her chest and buttocks were wrapped in a perfect arc. Her long red hair was slightly curled and draped over her shoulders. There was a bit of arrogance in her eyes. She was in sharp contrast to the mayor, who was wearing rough clothes. Second miss, I've already asked the most experienced hunters in town. They didn't find any traces of ferret magical beasts in the vicinity of the town. If such magical beasts were to appear in the vicinity of our town, I'm afraid there would have been people sacrificed in the town. However, there hasn't been any population loss in the town in the past few months, so I'm afraid I can't help you. The mayor smiled awkwardly. She took a sip of the red wine from the mayor's collection and frowned slightly. The taste was really hard for her to swallow, but the good upbringing of her family prevented her from vomiting on the spot. Eventually, she swallowed it. Looking at the table full of roasted lamb and suckling pig, she felt that it was already tasteless. She stood up and said, "Let's go, Aurora." "Yes, Mississippi." A short-haired girl beside her nodded with a cold expression. She held a sword in her arms and nodded. The mayor was a little surprised. He didn't expect her to not eat after he had prepared so many delicacies, but he didn't dare to force her to stay. He hurriedly went up to her and said, "Second miss, let me see you out." Avia nodded slightly and didn't refuse. She led the knights out of the door. Their armor and swords clanked against each other. It was very pleasing to the ear. Just as she stepped out of the door, Avia raised her head and looked into the distance. It was a habit of hers. Looking into the distance always made her feel that she had a big goal. But when she looked, she suddenly saw two black shadows appear in the distant sky. The next moment, the black shadows expanded rapidly. In the time it took to take a breath, they grew from small silhouettes to faces. It was a man and a woman. Both of them had almost perfect faces. Who is it? At this moment, the knight squires around them also sensed it. They quickly drew their swords and stood guard beside Avia. The sword-wielding girl beside Avia looked up. Her indifferent expression suddenly froze. Her eyes widened slightly, revealing a bit of astonishment. Then, there was a hint of surprise hidden deep in her eyes. Whoosh! Two figures whistled through the air and landed 10 meters in front of the crowd. They looked down at the crowd, bringing with them a powerful wind pressure that caused the crowd to feel as if a gale was blowing on their faces, causing their hair to flutter. Dean's indifferent eyes fell on Aurora in the crowd, but he didn't open his mouth. "You are..." Avia felt a huge pressure coming from Dean's body. Her heart was shocked. This pressure was stronger than her teacher's. She was about to open her mouth when a surprised voice came from behind her. "Teacher," Aurora called out in joy. She took a few steps forward, but suddenly thought of something. She bowed and saluted. "Teacher, you are finally back." Avia was stunned. She looked at Aurora, who was bowing respectfully. "Aurora, what nonsense are you talking about? If teacher hears you, he won't let you off easily." Aurora didn't apologize as obediently as she remembered. Instead, she looked up at the youth as if she didn't hear anything. "Did you worship a teacher?" Dean heard the girl's words and asked Aurora. Aurora lowered her head. "Yes, teacher, but I just wanted to learn and get close to the upper-class forces. I didn't really regard him as a teacher." "Good job." Dean nodded. He didn't blame Aurora at all. Avia and the other knights were dumbfounded. One must know that Aurora and Avia were both apprentices of the Phoenix Lord. Avia was even more proud of it. One must know that the Phoenix Lord was one of the strongest in the abyss of the Giant Wall. His status was extremely high. If Aurora's words were to spread out, then even if she didn't die in the future, she would still lose a layer of skin. "Are you crazy?" Avia couldn't help but shout. "What about the others?" Dean asked. Aurora replied. "Noise and the others have gone to other main cities. But your friend Zach seems to have had an accident. I don't know the specific situation. I've been learning from the Phoenix Lord, so I don't have many opportunities to come in contact with them." Dean wrinkled his brows as he remembered that he didn't sense Zach's aura. His heart sank. Zach and Mason were his companions when they were scavengers. Although they couldn't fight side by side now, but they represented his childhood memories. "Come with me to find them," Dean said. Aurora nodded. "Yes." Avia was confused. She had never left the Giant Wall. Naturally, she didn't think that Dean and Aurora were from the Outer Wall. If it was another Abyss powerhouse, then they would be able to guess it from these words alone. "Aurora, do you know what you're talking about? Both of you will be finished if teacher hears you." Avia couldn't help but grab Aurora's arm. Dean seemed to notice Avria, but there was no fluctuation in his eyes as his eyes fell on her beautiful face. "Is this your friend or enemy? Are you going to solve it?" Aurora's heart jumped. "Teacher, Miss Avia is my friend. She is also a student of the Phoenix Lord. Moreover, she is a miss of the Stantine family. She takes good care of me." Dean replied, "Since you are indebted to them, then give the city to them." Aurora was shocked as she heard Dean's words. She knew Dean's character. Did teacher want to kill the Lord of the Giant Wall? Avria was stunned when she heard Dean's words. She couldn't help but laugh. She couldn't help but open her mouth to ridicule, but Aurora's reaction was extremely fast. She quickly covered her mouth and shook her head. "Let's go." Dean didn't stay any longer as he flew forward. Chapter 12:31. Aurora was anxious as she saw Dean fly away. She quickly followed him. "Aurora, do you really want to go?" Avia hurriedly pulled her. If Aurora left, today's matter was bound to spread to her teacher's ears. At that time, no one could save her. "Littleya, I want to follow my teacher. He promised to give your family a city, and your family will also rise in the future." Aurora pried Olivia's slender hand away and turned to her with a serious expression. "What city? He is not His Majesty. He can't give people a fief." Avia felt that Aurora was bewitched and wanted to wake her up. Aurora saw her thoughts, but didn't explain much. "It's not a city, it's the Giant Wall. My teacher is a great and strong man. You will soon be able to witness it." She turned and quickly ran after Dean's back. After a few ups and downs, she stepped on the houses of the town and flew up to catch up. Avia stared blankly at the back of the three leaving figures. She felt that it was ridiculous. The gift was not a city, but the Giant Wall. For her, the Giant Wall was the whole world. But a stranger actually said that he would give the world to her family. This was simply crazy. She quickly reacted and glanced at the surrounding knights and squires. She knew that this matter couldn't be concealed. The matter of Aurora rebelling against the Phoenix Lord would soon spread to her teacher's ears. She couldn't cover it up, otherwise her family would be implicated. In that case, she could only take the initiative to report the matter. "I'm sorry, Aurora. You are too confused. Teacher, who is this?" Aurora followed Dean as he jumped through the forest. She saw a beautiful girl behind Dean. Even though she was a girl, she was amazed. She couldn't help but ask curiously. She knew that her teacher had a sweetheart for a long time. Could it be that time could really wear away everything? Was this teacher's new sweetheart? Her name is Godwa. She is equivalent to my child. Dean casually introduced. Child. Aurora was stunned. Wasn't he not married? How could he have child? But looking at Dean's expression, it was obvious that he didn't want to talk about it. Soon, the two came to the nearest city. Dean found a hotel and asked Aurora to gather everyone here at the fastest speed. It didn't matter even if their identity was exposed. Aurora received the order and immediately sent a letter to the people of each city. Teacher, are you going to leave here? Aurora asked curiously. Dean nodded. I'll take you to the imperial capital. Aurora was shocked. During this period of time, she had gathered a lot of information from the Phoenix Lord, including some information about the imperial capital. She knew that there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the imperial capital. Although there weren't many people in the abyss, they weren't all that rare either. The Abyss Master, who was above the abyss, was a giant in the imperial capital. As for the kings, they were kings who looked down on the entire imperial capital. In that kind of environment, they had to be more careful. They didn't dare to get angry, and didn't dare to be arrogant. After a moment, Dean led the team back from the giant wall of Sylvia. Noyce, Barton, Mason, Sergei, and other familiar faces appeared. All of them were excited to see Dean. They felt like rootless duckweed and homeless. Dean was like the core of their big family. Master, you are finally back. Dean, you are back. We have been waiting for you for a long time. We have done all the things that you have asked us to do. I have infiltrated an old aristocratic family in West Shell. I'm the captain of their family's private army. In addition to excitement and surprise, everyone took the initiative to tell Dean about what had happened during this period of time and reported the things they had inquired about to Dean. Dean had a faster way to know everything. For example, he could check their memories. But he didn't do that. He was not in a hurry. He listened to them slowly and waited for others to come. After a few hours, most of the people had arrived. The rest hadn't arrived yet. Some of them were killed in the fight. Where is Zach? Dudian asked as he saw Macon arrive. Mason's excited expression stiffened as he heard Dean's words. He was silent for a moment. Dean, Zach sneaked into the army to steal confidential information. But he was found. He paused for a moment. He is dead. The hall became quiet. Everyone was silent. In addition to Zach, many people had been sacrificed. But their relationship with Dean was far less than Zach and Dean's. Dean took a deep breath and said, since it is a blood debt, it will be paid with blood. Mason's face slightly changed. Dean, don't be impulsive. There is more than one abyssal on the giant wall. We are outnumbered and will suffer a big loss. It won't be too late to take revenge when we are stronger. Dean looked at him. You have matured. Mason smiled. I have seen so many things. If I'm not mature then, I would be mentally retarded. Dean stood up and glanced at Sergei, Noyce, Aurora, and others. I have summoned you to take you to the imperial capital. I will take you to the imperial capital. I will take you to witness it and exercise your courage and mind. In the future, when I get the world, you will enjoy endless wealth and rights. If you are in a high position, then you must have a high attitude. This is a training for you. Everyone was stunned as they looked at each other. They wondered if there was an illusion in their ears. Attack the imperial capital? Many of them knew what kind of behemoth the imperial capital was. For them, even a giant wall under the control of the empire was enough to make them feel breathless. Not to mention the imperial capital. Dean knew their thoughts, but he didn't care. It was because he knew the limitations of their thinking that he found them before killing the demon emperor. He wanted to take them to the imperial capital so that they could see the wider world. In the future, when they worked for him, they wouldn't be scared by the momentum of their subordinates. This move could be described as well-intentioned. Master, the difference between the imperial capital and the giant wall is like heaven and earth. Noyce looked at Dean and cautiously said. He was disappointed in his heart. In his mind, the young master had always been a strategist. He would never make such a rash mistake. Don't worry. I know everything about the imperial capital. A mere king can be destroyed with a flick of my finger. Dean interrupted him and looked at everyone. My current strength is not the same as before. The abyss isn't even worthy to carry my shoes. You just need to relax and follow me to conquer the world. In the future, you will manage the world for me. Everyone looked at each other in disbelief. Some of Noyce's trusted subordinates couldn't help but speculate in their heart. Was there something wrong with the master's mind? However, they didn't dare to say it out loud. Come with me to the capital. Dean didn't continue to talk as he walked out of the hall. The hotel was booked by Aurora. The entire hall was filled with their people. At the moment when Dean came out, they separated into two groups and followed him out. Out of the hotel, Dean unscrupulously changed his wings and soared into the sky, causing the surrounding passers-by to exclaim. Noyce pulled Aurora. You are the first one to see the young master. Do you think he is normal? Aurora rolled her eyes in annoyance and said, Don't you feel that teacher's aura is far more powerful than before? I feel that with his strength, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to kill the abyss. Perhaps he has already reached the level of a king tier in the imperial capital. Noyce's eyes lit up. It is possible. Let's go, Aurora said. Noyce, Mason, and others led the others to catch up with Dean. Some of them had the ability to fly, while others jumped on the ground to follow Dean. The group of people jumped from many buildings in the city and went straight towards the capital. This scene alarmed the city lord. The commander of the city guards was sent to block the edge of the city. When he saw Dean flying over, he immediately stepped forward to stop him. But Dean didn't stop. He didn't see how he did it, but the commander of the city guards was hit by the air. He suddenly groaned and flew out. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Dean went straight to the capital after flying out of the city. He crossed the mountains and rushed into one city after another. Along the way, the city guards came to intercept him, but they weren't able to get close to him before they were sent flying. //3_3610/ Chapter 1232. When Dean led Noyce and others arrived at the giant wall, they saw that the capital was heavily guarded. Pioneers were standing on the giant wall like javelins. They were led by inner wilderness level and inner wilderness level generals. They seemed to know where Dean and others were coming from. Only the south side of the city was heavily guarded. Noyce and others' faces changed. They were ready to stop, but Dean was still flying forward. He didn't have any intention to slow down. They couldn't help but be startled. But then they quickly followed up. Who are you? A commander in golden armor was standing in midair. His eyes were cold and filled with killing intent as he looked down at the crowd. He shouted at Dean, who was at the front. You don't deserve to know. Dean's face was indifferent. He clasped his hands behind his back and rushed forward like a rainbow. It seemed that he didn't care about the many soldiers on the city wall. The golden-armored ruler's face turned cold, and the bat-like wings on his back expanded by several meters. His teeth turned into fangs, causing his face to change shape. Just as he was about to transform into his demonic form, a cold light suddenly shot out. His entire body broke out in a cold sweat, and he felt an extreme sense of danger lock onto his body. He was so frightened that he couldn't move. At this moment, he felt the heat in his body was taken away from his eyebrows. Bang! The golden armor master fell from the air. His half-demon body fell on the city wall. His armor fell on the ground. Get lost! Dean flew to the top of the city wall. He raised his hand, and his palm became hundreds of meters big. It swept across the city wall as if he was smoothing the dust on a table. The pioneers and inner wilderness level warriors on the city wall were all dumbfounded. Before they could react, they felt as if they had been hit by a giant mountain. An irresistible force pushed them into the air, making them feel dizzy and dizzy. After Dean waved his hand, the giant palm quickly retracted. It seemed that the previous scene was just an illusion to everyone. He moved forward without the slightest pause. This scene not only shocked the soldiers on the wall, but also made Noyce and the others dumbfounded. What kind of magic mark ability is this? A hand that's hundreds of meters long can be turned into a hand? As far as they knew, there was no magic mark that had such an ability. After a short period of sluggishness, everyone quickly reacted. Thinking of Dean's previous words, they quickly followed up. Hundreds of meters high walls were easily climbed by their feet. While everyone was climbing up, the generals and guards in the distance finally recovered. Under the roar of one of the generals, everyone immediately used their demonification ability and rushed towards Noise and the others. You don't know my tolerance. Dean frowned. He didn't wait for Noise and others to make a move. He waved his hand, and his palm expanded rapidly. It turned into a crescent, moon-like giant sickle that was hundreds of meters long. Bang! A huge mark was left on the wall from the top of the wall to the bottom of the wall. All the guards on the edge of the mark were cut in half. In his eyes, it was a casual move, but in the eyes of others, it was a shocking blow. The rest of the guards trembled in fear. They didn't dare to think about such a terrifying power. However, Dean didn't take back the giant scythe this time. He chopped several times, and the entire southern city wall was cut into several huge ditches. Even the people in the distance could see it clearly. The surviving guards stood rooted to the ground, not daring to move recklessly. Dean took back the giant scythe and continued to fly forward. Noise and others were shocked. They finally saw Dean's strength. It was far from what they saw when they left. Everyone was surprised and excited to keep up with Dean. They jumped over the buildings along the way. The civilians in the capital hadn't heard about the incident. They were surprised to see a large number of strong people jumping up and down. It must be known that the security of the capital was strict. Such a scene had never happened before. Some carriages of nobles were trampled on. The ladies and young masters jumped out of the carriages and cursed. However, the perpetrators had already flown away from the place. In less than 10 minutes, they arrived in front of the palace. At the moment, a large number of guards were gathered outside the palace. They had already known about the fall of the city wall. Above the palace, with 1,000 steps, numerous guards lined up on both sides. Each of the guards was a pioneer-level warrior. Standing in the front were 3 figures with extraordinary bearings. The one in the middle was wearing a black and gold royal robe. He slightly raised his chin as if he was used to looking down on the crowd. Beside him were a white-haired old man with a hunched back and a mature, beautiful woman in a red dress. Teacher. Aurora's pupils shrank when she saw the woman in red dress. She didn't expect that teacher to come to the capital to help the Wall Lord. Dean flew to the top of the palace. Everyone had to look up at him. He looked down at the many strong people gathered in front of the palace hall. Who is the Wall Lord? Stand up. Although his tone was flat, it had unquestionable majesty. Bold! With an angry shout, a middle-aged man dressed in a royal robe and dressed like an official stood out from behind the 3 of them. Before he could take 2 steps, his body suddenly flew backwards, smashing through the wall of the royal hall, and he stopped breathing. This unexpected change made everyone's face suddenly change. The 3 leaders couldn't hold their faces, and their expressions became cold. They looked at Dean with a bit of fear in their eyes, because even they didn't know how Dean made his move. They had never heard of such a strange ability, but they could infer that the person who came was indeed from outside the giant wall. Which giant wall do you come from? Or from the imperial capital? The middle-aged man in black gold robe slowly opened his mouth. His attitude was very calm. Dean's eyes fell on him. Are you the wall's leader? You are at the middle level of the abyss. You are a little stronger than the 2 beside you. You can indeed command them. I will give you a quarter of an hour to hand over the people in charge of punishment and secrets of the military. Why are you looking for them? Did they offend you? The middle-aged man in black gold robe slightly frowned. There was a trace of vigilance in his eyes. Dean could see through his strength, but he was still so calm. It showed that he wasn't afraid of him. Huh? Dean's eyes fell on him. After a moment, he slowly said, It seems that you don't cherish this quarter of an hour. Since that's the case, you should die early. What? The middle-aged man was startled. He didn't expect that Dean would turn hostile. They had 3 abyss experts on their side. The next moment, he saw Dean raise his hand. His palm suddenly changed to hundreds of meters in size. It was like a giant mountain that blocked the light above everyone's head. The shadow shrouded everyone as the palm came down. The people in front of the palace were shocked. Although they knew about the fall of the city walls, but they didn't see the battle. Dean's ability at the moment was completely different from what they imagined. The palm still had the appearance of a human hand, but the size was terrifying. The middle-aged man in black gold robe was shocked, but he quickly recovered. His eyes flashed with anger and killing intent. He suddenly rose into the sky, and his whole body was demonized. He tore his robe and changed into a 7 or 8 meters long dragon man. He looked like an ancient Jurassic dinosaur, but he had a pair of wings on his back and a sharp horn on his forehead. He looked up to the sky and spat out a blazing flame. The flame could melt steel immediately. Even the Phoenix Lord, who was also good at fire, was afraid of it. Whoosh! The flame beam hit the palm of the giant palm, but it didn't penetrate immediately. The giant palm was still pressing down unstoppably. When the others in the surroundings saw this, all of them fled in terror. Impossible! The middle-aged man in black gold robe was horrified. His flame had no effect. He was ready to retreat, but the palm covered hundreds of meters and covered the entire front hall of the palace. It was too late for him to escape the range of the palm. He could only drill into the ground. Boom! The giant palm smashed down, and the earth shook. The magnificent golden palace hall was smashed into ashes. Countless dust overflowed from the gaps of the fingers. The thousands of high steps were smashed, and a deep palm print was left on the ground. In the next moment, the giant palm shrunk, becoming smaller and smaller, disappearing into the dust. A moment later, the palm rose up from the dust and shrunk to 12 meters in size. 2 of its fingers were carrying an object 7 to 8 meters in size. It was the dragonoid that the black gold-robed middle-aged man had demonized. The thick thumb and index finger pinched the dragon man's head. The lower body of the dragon man was powerless. Dean gently shook twice, and the tentacles between his fingers plunged into the dragon man's brain. He rummaged through the memories and soon finished reading. After that, his fingers exerted a little force. The dragon man's skull cracked and blood overflowed. / 3_3610/ Chapter 1233. The guards outside the palace were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Noyce, Aurora, and others were shocked as they looked at the Wall Lord's body that fell into the dust. Dudian had killed the Wall Lord as if he was an ant. Dudian's extraordinary power deterred all the surviving guards outside the palace. No one dared to come forward. No one dared to take revenge for the Wall Lord. The world was silent. Whoosh! A red figure flew out from the edge of the dust cloud. It was Phoenix Lord. She had a premonition of danger as the palm fell. She dodged in advance and was lucky enough to survive. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Dudian crush the Wall Lord's body. However, she was in a high position for a long time, and her mind was firm. She quickly reacted and rushed out of the dust cloud. She knew that it was useless to hide in front of such a person. It would only speed up her death. It was better to take the initiative to admit defeat and surrender. Elder, please forgive me. Phoenix Lord knelt in the air. Her heart was trembling. She was afraid that Dudian would kill her. Dean indifferently glanced at her. There were a total of 3 Abyss experts, including the Wall Lord. The old man with the white beard tried to resist his palm with the Wall Lord, but was smashed on the spot. But this one escaped in advance. She wasn't his main target, so he was too lazy to split a sharp blade from his palm to kill her. Since you know your crime, then retreat. Dudian indifferently said. The Phoenix Lord heaved a sigh of relief. She respectfully lowered her head and retreated to the side. She didn't look sideways and only looked at the tips of her feet. Because she was bowing her head, she quickly saw many figures following Dean. At a glance, she saw a familiar figure. Wasn't it her latest student, Aurora? Phoenix Lord was startled. Dean closed his eyes, but soon opened them again. They're all in the king's city. I don't have to look for them. After saying that, he suddenly raised his hand. His arm grew upwards, reaching a height of 1,000 meters. He clenched his palm into a fist, and a diamond-shaped crystal appeared on the surface. Under the refraction of the sunlight, it was colorful. Suddenly, dozens of light beams shot out, sweeping towards the buildings outside the palace like lasers. Bang! Bang! Every region was shaken and filled with dust. It was as if they had been hit by a rocket. Dudeen retracted his palm and looked at Noyce and others. Let's go and get ready to leave. Through the memory of the Wall Lord, Dean killed all the military personnel who were involved in the Zax matter. There was nothing left in this place. Everyone looked at each other. They thought about what Dean had said before. They couldn't help but feel reluctant and excited. Some of them thought that it was better to kill the Wall leader and occupy the magpie's nest. Why should they continue to fight and kill? But they didn't dare to express their thoughts. Dean thought of something before leaving. He looked at the Phoenix Lord. You are the only one left here. I promised the little girl that I would give the giant wall to her. You will supervise this matter. From now on, you will protect the little girl's family. Do you understand? The Phoenix Overlord's heart shuddered. This gigantic wall was actually given away so casually. She saw that Dudian's expression was indifferent. It didn't seem like he was lying. She asked, I don't know who the person is. Dudian didn't answer, but looked at Aurora. Aurora understood and hurriedly stepped forward and said in a loud voice, My lord, the person my teacher is talking about is Avia. The Phoenix Lord heard her voice. Although she had noticed her before, she didn't expect her to have a teacher-student relationship with Dean. Her face couldn't help but change when she heard Aurora's words. In fact, she was very fond of her new student, but she didn't expect that the latter didn't really treat her as a teacher. She already had such a powerful person as her teacher. Why would she need her? She was the lord of a city after all. She nodded as if nothing had happened. I know. I'll do it. Dudian turned around and flew away with God of Wa. Noyce and others followed him. The Phoenix Lord looked at the backs of these people, and her heart was filled with mixed feelings. She faintly guessed that Dean had seen through her identity and let her go because of Aurora's face. Once upon a time, she had to rely on her student's face to survive. Dudian and others left the king's city without any hindrance. After half a day, they left the giant wall of Balga and stepped into the wilderness. In the evening, they officially entered the abyss area, which hadn't been cleaned out by the giant wall. The night sky was clear and the stars were shining brightly. The ruins of the abyss area were as bright as day. Everyone settled in the woods and ate the food they brought with them. They rested for half a night and then continued their journey. Under the protection of Dean and God of Wa, all the abyssal monsters they met along the way were killed. The dangerous abyss seemed to have become a spring outing. Everyone followed behind them and watched the mysterious abyss area. They saw the ruins of the old era collapsed in the wilderness and covered with moss. They also saw a lot of ruins from the old era. They felt very novel. Halfway through the journey, Dean saw a dragon galloping in the air. He immediately raised his hand and shot it down from a distance. An abyss monster jumped out of the dragon. It didn't have time to rush over and shout as it was pierced by Dudian's light beam. This is the dragon messenger. He's the spokesperson of the Empire. Dudian explained to everyone. He dissected the dragon and barbecued the dragon meat as lunch. They continued their journey after eating. A few days later, they arrived at the Imperial City. They met a lot of monsters along the way. Some of them were named monsters. They also met an ancient monster. Dudian killed it and took out the soul worm. He gave it to Noyce and others to seal. It would help them to quickly improve their physique after they arrived at the Imperial City. We will disguise ourselves as an Imperial adventure team. Don't expose our identity. Dudian said. Although his strength was enough to break into the Imperial City, he didn't want to alarm the Demon Emperor. The latter wasn't like the giant wall of Balga. The Demon Emperor might not be in the Imperial City at the moment. Maybe he had already set up an ambush waiting for them. Everyone didn't have any objection to Dudian's words. Chapter 1234. Imperial Capital. The majestic giant wall seemed to go straight to the sky. It was much higher than the other giant walls that Dean had seen. He thought that the giant wall was the graveyard of the Aragami. If that was the case, then the Aragami were buried in the ordinary giant wall. But the origami buried in the imperial capital were peerless characters like the ancestors of the origami. The origami that were buried in the giant wall, although they were just ordinary origami, they were still considered as the top masters among the origami race. The real ordinary origami were weak, not much different from the pioneers. They were not strong enough to help the giant wall suppress the monsters. Dean's eyes flashed. Killing the Demon Emperor was just a trivial matter for him. What he was really interested in was the countless secrets buried in the imperial capital. These secrets were related to the origami family. Lin Chongqing's memory didn't have them. After a moment, they approached the giant wall. Dean had some understanding of the appearance of the imperial capital from the memory of the Demon Emperor. After all, the Demon Emperor had taken a dragon to serve in the imperial capital. Dean led Noyce and others to a giant door on the east side of the imperial capital. The giant wall of the imperial capital was the same as the other giant walls. The difference was that there were 6 giant doors on the 4 sides of the imperial capital. Each giant wall was tens of thousands of kilometers away from each other. It showed how vast the area of the imperial capital was. It was more than enough to accommodate more than 1 billion people. Dean and God of War slowly landed at the giant door on the east side of the imperial capital. The nearby forest was relatively sparse. Along the way, there were some good quality armors that were abandoned in the mud. Some were broken armors, and some were buried together with their owners. Dean didn't feel strange about the imperial capital, even though he hadn't been to the imperial capital through the memory of Crimson Moon and Bolo. He knew that the imperial capital was a warlike place. Ordinary civilians had long been accustomed to hunters. It wasn't like in the giant wall of Sylvia where hunters were reduced to dirty tools of the nobles. In the imperial capital, hunters were a profession. They were more respected than lawyers, doctors, and clergymen. Of course, ordinary hunters were far too common. They couldn't be compared to famous doctors and lawyers. However, those who had reached the level of the Dominator or the Abyss were already considered the #1 figures in the imperial capital. Even the top lawyers wouldn't dare to underestimate such figures. Of course, they wouldn't be too afraid of them either. After all, top-notch lawyers and doctors were all loyal to kings or ancient clans. Naturally, they did not fear the ordinary Abyss. The Lord of the Abyss, on the other hand, was already a behemoth in the imperial capital. It presided over a region, and its wealth and power had reached the pinnacle for them. The only beings that they had to respect were the 7 lords and the Demon Emperor. The 7 kings were like 7 dazzling stars overlooking the imperial capital. To the commoners, they were like gods in the clouds, and it was an honor to be able to see them. As for the Demon Emperor, his sense of existence was relatively weak. He hid his strength and was far less dazzling than the 7 kings. However, in the eyes of the top powerhouses, the reverence they felt for the Demon Emperor was 10 times or even 100 times stronger than when they faced the 7 kings. Dean asked everyone to disguise themselves. They wrapped the few monsters they had hunted along the way and carried them on their shoulders. They pretended that they were hunting prey. Then they slowly walked towards the giant gate. The giant gate of the imperial capital was open all year round. There were many hunters in the imperial capital. A large number of adventurers groups and adventurers guilds were formed. They would often form teams to hunt monsters and sell them to the Monster Research Institute and other related institutions in the imperial capital. Or they would bring back the monster's scales and claws and sell them to blacksmiths to earn some travel expenses. In addition to the independent adventurers, the 7 lords would often lead an army to the depths of the wilderness to kill fierce monsters. They would train the combat ability of the army. Therefore, there were iron hooves and messy footprints everywhere near the giant gate. The air was filled with the smell of metal and human sweat. As they approached the giant gate, Dean saw another team of adventurers returning to the imperial capital. There were 20 or 30 of them. Each of them was carrying a huge, bulging backpack. It seemed that they had dismembered the monsters they had hunted. There was a trace of vigilance in the other party's eyes as Dean saw the adventurers. The giant gate was the most chaotic place. The guards didn't care about what was happening outside the gate. Therefore, there were many people lying in ambush outside the gate. They bullied the weak and robbed other people's spoils of war. Dong, dong, dong. At this time, the ground gently trembled. Dean released his perception and felt a group of beasts rushing out of the giant gate. They passed through the long aisle of the giant gate and appeared in everyone's line of sight. It was a group of knights wearing silver helmets and dark silver armor. The style of the helmet was very strange. There were spikes erected on the helmet, and only a pair of cold eyes could be seen from the armor. Each of the armor's chest was engraved with a bloody forest pattern. Dean knew that this was the badge of the Bloody Thorns King. The knights belonged to the Silver Moon Legion under the command of the Bloody Thorns King. It was a subordinate legion of the Silver Moon Legion. The Bloody Thorns King died in the Federation. It seems that the Bloody Thorns King didn't disband. There are too many kings that have fallen in the Federation. The imperial capital will fall into chaos. The forces and territories of the kings will become ownerless. The other hungry wolves and vultures will probably covet them and want to carve them up. Dean's eyes lit up as he thought about the current situation in the imperial capital. The fall of the king would cause turmoil in the imperial capital. It would also cause a chain reaction at the grassroots level. It was a turbulent period. The Demon Emperor not only had to guard against his arrival, but also had to rectify the situation in the imperial capital. Dean's mouth curved into a smile as he led Noyce and others into the city. He took out a special gold coin from the imperial capital and threw it to the guard. They went straight into the city. This gold coin wasn't taken from Wall Lord Borja, but he had casually transformed it from the soil on the ground. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that stone could be turned into gold. However, scientists needed to use instruments to change the structure of matter, but he could directly change the structure of his own body through magic, then assimilate the structure of foreign objects, and then change the structure of foreign objects again, turning them into what he wanted. He could use grass to make swords and other weapons. This was his current ability. He was equivalent to a god in terms of the use of his abilities. The only difference between him and a true god was the issue of power. For example, God of Wa could swallow external materials and convert them into her own energy. Although he could do it too, but the latter could convert 10 tons of energy at once. He couldn't convert half a ton and would suffer from indigestion. Dean had been sleeping for 300 years. The imperial capital was built after the disaster. It had a history of more than 200 years. The culture of hunting monsters had already multiplied to the extreme. Dean wasn't in a hurry to find the Demon Emperor. He took Noyce and others to a bustling residential city near the imperial capital. They ate and drank to their heart's content. Then he took Noyce and others to the trading market where soul worms were sold. In every city, shops selling soul insects could be seen everywhere. However, these shops were not private shops. Instead, they were like the alliance merchants that belonged to the soul insect industry of the 7 great monarchs. All the sale of soul worms had legal rights and interests. Private sale of soul worms was illegal. Anyone who was caught would be sentenced to death. In the trading market, in addition to selling soul worms, there were also shops selling magic marks and all kinds of hunter equipment. It wasn't a secret to use 5 soul worms to strengthen magic marks. Dean saw the banner of the Bloody Thorn King hanging in the trading square. He knew that this was the property of the Bloody Thorn King. He immediately made a token of the Bloody Thorn King and went to the building where the soul worms were sold. Chapter 1235. The interior of the Merchant Union building was incomparably spacious, like a giant shopping mall. As soon as one entered the door, one could see many independent shops with different kinds of soul insects hanging outside. Some specialized in power-type soul insects, some specialized in stealth-type soul insects, and some directly hung the name of a certain legendary soul insect, attracting the attention of many passers-by. Dean led Noyce and others to the second floor. They didn't look at the bottom floor. The bottom floor was the shops run by the powerful families. The real good things were on the second and third floor. The prices were fair and they were equivalent to the official price. The soul worms were genuine and there was no false packaging. The The environment on the second floor was obviously quieter than the bottom floor, but there were still many strong hunters wandering around. Dean led Noyce and others to a shop. The service lady's eyes lit up as she saw the large number of people. She knew that it was a big business. She immediately came to greet them. "Sir, what kind of soul worm do you want to see?" Dean raised his hand and took out the blood thorn token. "Tell your manager to come out." The service lady's face changed as she saw the bloody thorn token. She respectfully retreated and informed the shop owner. She contacted the manager of the merchant union. The steward of the merchant union was a middle-aged man. He was wearing a suit. His face slightly changed as he saw the blood thorn token. He politely said, "I don't know what is the purpose of your visit. Prepare a batch of Arctic worms according to the number of people here." Dean ordered. The middle-aged manager was startled as he glanced at Noyce and others. "Sir, the ice worms are under strict control even in ordinary times." "I'm afraid." "Extraordinary times?" Dean looked at him. "Let me see." He raised his hand and pinched the forehead of the middle-aged manager. His fingers pierced into the manager's brain to read his memories. The assistants and maids around him were scared. They were about to exclaim when Dean moved his mind. Several snake-like tentacles swept out from his arm and wrapped around their necks, strangling them to death. Dean retracted his palm and looked at the middle-aged manager. "Call all the nearby ice worms." "Yes, my lord," middle-aged steward said. Dean had tampered with his memory and turned him into a servant. After a moment, 3 ice worms and more than a dozen legendary soul worms were sent to Dean. There were 2 2-star soul worms, and the rest were 1-star legendary soul worms. Dean let Mason, Aurora, and Sergei choose their favorite legendary soul worm. Then he gave them 3 ice worms and helped them to implant and suppress them. Soon, 3 abyss powerhouses were born in the merchant house. Combat skills needed to be tempered, but physical evolution only required resources. When Dean implanted the soul worms into the 3 of them, he suddenly wondered if he could use his own ability to replicate the extreme ice worm to replace the extreme ice worm's needs. If that was the case, it meant that he could also replicate the extreme ice insect king. Moreover, he could replicate the fighting memory and inject it into the brain of Noyce and others so that they could gain rich fighting experience in an instant. Dean was shocked by this idea. If he could do it, it meant that he could build a world-shaking army at any time. Moreover, it was very likely to be possible. Dean asked the steward of the merchant union to seal the building. Only Noyce and him were left in the building. Then he tried to control his body to replicate the gene level to make the ice worm. Very quickly, an extreme ice worm hatched in his palm. It was sparkling and translucent and was a part of his genes. After it was formed, he severed the connection between him and the extreme ice worm, allowing it to become an independent life form. However, although this extreme ice worm had all the external characteristics of an extreme ice worm, it didn't seem to be alive. The extreme ice worm doesn't have a heart. Its structure is more complex than the human body. It would be easy for me to create a heart, but the cells of the extreme ice worm are equivalent to the heart. They can continue to transform and reproduce. The cells that I've constructed can't reproduce independently without my control. Dean frowned. The extreme ice worm that he had constructed could be regarded as a real extreme ice worm. However, the extreme ice worm would die as soon as he cut off the connection with it. Its lifespan was only for a moment. How can I give it life? Dean felt that this was a big problem. However, if he could overcome this problem, it meant that his previous conjecture wouldn't be hindered and he would be able to build a strong army in an instant. I have to create a consciousness in their body if I want them to live. Dean thought of a breakthrough. He weaved a piece of memory and sent it into the body of the extreme ice worm. It didn't take long for the extreme ice worm to crawl slowly. It swam to Dean's feet and intimately rubbed his trousers. Dean's eyes lit up. It was really feasible. Not to mention that the extreme ice worm could replace the real extreme ice worm in the human body. However, the current situation meant that Dean could not only change the structure of various materials, such as metal, coal, and so on. He could also create a living life. The structure of the extreme ice worm was much more complex than that of a human. If he could create an extreme ice worm, then wouldn't it mean that he could create a human? If that was the case, then what was the difference between him and a real god? He completely forgot about Noise and the others around him. He excitedly started to divide and reproduce extra cells through his own cells. He moved them to his palm and constructed a human-like body, and then constructed a beating heart. When he severed the connection, the young man made of flesh and blood that flowed out of his palm, stood in a daze. His eyes were empty, but his body exuded a surging vitality. Life. Dean was so excited that he stood up. Noise, Aurora, and the others, as well as their trusted subordinates, were stunned and in disbelief when they saw this strange scene. In addition to shock, they also felt a bit of fear. Dean was so excited that he looked around the young man. He used his X-ray vision to scan every bone and meridian in the young man's body. He found that the structure of the young man's body was no different from that of a human's. While Dean was looking at the young man was also looking at Dean. Suddenly, he raised his hand and touched Dean, as if he wanted to touch the world. Dean grabbed the young man's hand. The young man tried to break free, but his strength couldn't compare to Dean's. The young man was anxious. He tried his best to twist his body, but he couldn't change the situation. He opened his mouth and bit Dean's hand. Dean let go of his hand. He didn't let go because he was afraid that the young man would bite him, but the test was over. Although I didn't fabricate memories for him, but he has been born with primitive instincts. It seems that he is a giant baby. Dean's eyes flashed. So, this young man was an independent life form, creating life. It was incredible, but the young man had accomplished such a thing so easily. It turns out that the myths and legends aren't all false. God is omnipotent. He can create things and create people. Dean muttered. At this moment, he realized the feeling of being a god. So reckless and so powerful. At the same time, he suddenly felt that humans weren't that great and that life wasn't that precious. Chapter 12:36. Noise. He will follow you in the future. You will be responsible for teaching him. Dean handed over the young man to Noise. He wanted to see the difference between the life he had created and a real human being. After all, the young man was a blueprint of a human being. The only difference was that the physique of the young man was equivalent to that of the pioneers. However, there were no magic marks in the young man's body. It was pure physical strength. Noise was stunned. Young master, is this your ability? Almost. Dean smiled. In the future, you will know that abilities are not single, but ever-changing. In the final analysis, abilities are just the keys to develop your own potential. Noise, Aurora, and others didn't understand. However, they felt that Dean's ability was simply incredible. He could create ice worms and people out of thin air. Such a method was extremely similar to the creator in the legends. Dean picked up the extreme ice worm by his feet. He thought that since he could create extreme ice worms, it would be easy for him to create legendary soul worms as well. He picked out a few legendary soul worms from Crimson Moon's memory and asked about the abilities that the dark-skinned woman liked and was good at. The dark-skinned woman replied in a trembling voice. She liked frontal combat and was good at violent abilities. Dean selected a type of legendary soul worm that was mainly based on strength and quickly constructed and replicated it. Soon, he created 6 similar legendary soul worms. These soul worms were different from the polar ice worm. They had a unique digestive system and brain nerves. When Dean constructed them together, these organs automatically operated their bodies. They were a living life. Dean let the dark-skinned woman continue to absorb and replace the original magic marks in her body. After a moment, her physique was upgraded from pioneer to dominator level. Then he put the ice worm into her body. After a moment, the dark-skinned woman's physique was upgraded again, and she became an abyss. It's really effective. There was a hint of joy in Dean's eyes. When he created the legendary soul worm to upgrade the dark-skinned woman's physique to the dominator realm, he had already guessed and looked forward to it. Now that he had succeeded, he was pleasantly surprised. This meant that he did not need to rely on any external forces. He himself was a huge treasure house that could produce a large number of legendary soul worms and polar ice worms. He could mass-produce powerful abyss. Moreover, he could fabricate fighting memories and input them into the mind of others so that they would have extraordinary fighting skills. They wouldn't need 10 years of hard work to become a powerful master. Omnipotent. It's really omnipotent. Dean couldn't help but laugh. Now that he had peerless power in his hands, his character seemed to be released. He was no longer as depressed as before. Noyce, who was most familiar with Dean, was very sensitive to this point. He was a bit surprised, but didn't think much about it. Not only can I cultivate the abyss, but also the king. It's not difficult to cultivate a god if I want. However, only a fool would do such a thing. Dean's face was full of smiles. This matter had brought him great confidence. With such a powerful ability, the whole world was not worth mentioning to him. He didn't even care about the coming alien worm. His only hope was to find Aisha as soon as possible. With his current means, he might be able to easily cure the undead virus in her body and help her get back the memories of these years. Thinking of this, he felt the blood in his body boiling. He couldn't wait to move or use his eyes to scan every inch of the soil in the whole empire to find Aisha. However, even with his godlike ability, he couldn't spread his perception to the whole empire. Even covering the whole imperial capital would be extremely difficult. Noyce, give me the Ice Worm King, Dean said to Noyce. Dean had given the Ice Worm King from the bottom of the Ice Dragon Lake to Noyce for safekeeping. Now that he left the giant wall of Balga, he naturally brought along with him. It was sealed in a transparent alloy can and wrapped in black cloth. Noyce trusted Aid carried it on his back. Noyce quickly nodded and ordered his men to bring the Ice Worm King. Dean lifted the black cloth, and with a swipe of his finger, he tore a gap in the sturdy alloy can. A mass of milky white meat slid out from the inside, squeezed out of the thin crack like a soft body, and, after a moment, all the meat was lost to the floor outside the can. The Ice Worm King was paralyzed on the ground like a puddle of mud. However, it seemed to sense something and immediately drilled into the ground to escape. Dean's palm became bigger and grabbed it. Ice Worm King? Haha, it's just a source insect of the extreme ice insect clan. There are at least 80,000 source insects like you that are born in the ice pool, right? Dean smiled faintly and casually said. The extreme Ice Worm King that was overflowing from Dudian's palm was startled when heard this. Its mucus turned into a mouth and eyes as it looked at Dudian in horror. How do you know about this? I know far more than you can imagine. What I'm curious about is that the blood moon has appeared twice in the past 300 years. Your compatriots have also come to the Earth twice. But why are you still hiding at the bottom of the lake? Your spaceship should be able to send and receive signals with a degree of damage. But they didn't come to pick you up. Did they abandon you? Or are they afraid of the origami of the Empire? Dean looked at it. The Ice Worm King was startled. Blood moon? My compatriots have come twice? How is it possible that they didn't come to find me if they came to the Earth? Nonsense. Dean was a little surprised. This Ice Worm King didn't know about this. He suddenly felt that there seemed to be something strange and other reasons. After thinking for a moment, he directly pierced into its body and looked through its memory. The Ice Worm King felt Dean's tentacles piercing into its body and quickly resisted. However, it found that all parts of its body were invaded. There seemed to be an unknown force pouring into its body and resonating with its body. It was difficult to distinguish which part of its body belonged to itself. Obviously, this strange feeling came from the human in front of it. It was extremely horrified. How could this human grow to such a terrifying level in such a short period of time? After a moment, Dean finally understood the reason. The memory of the Ice Worm King was an eye-opener for him. It turned out that the extraterrestrial magic worm clan was not only divided into Ice Worm and Flame Worm, which were natural enemies. Even within the same clan, the Ice Worm and Flame Worm were not monolithic. Just like humans, there were different factions, and each faction was loyal to a different great sage. The extreme ice insect king in front of him was one of the 12 ice demon insect sages who were loyal to him. Under the command of this great sage, this ice worm king was equivalent to a human leader. There were many such leaders. Each leader controlled a spaceship to invade the Earth. The 12 great sages cooperated to invade the Earth together. They captured the Earthlings as materials to become gods. They hoped to cultivate the gods first and destroy the flame worms and the origami clan. Unfortunately, the changes in the war caused cracks in the short-term alliance of the great sages, especially the counterattack of the Earth. The explosion of nuclear weapons gave the ice worm a fatal blow. Many great sages withdrew from the Earth. Dean saw the war of 300 years ago more and more clearly. The layers of fog were lifted in front of his eyes. The planet that was once full of human footprints had turned into a planet full of monsters. The culprits and the various purposes behind them had surfaced. It seems that the great sage or loyal to has most likely died in the war. Dean smiled. So the ice worm that controls the Federation should be one of the other sages. I don't know how many sages there are, or if there is only one. The ice worm king looked at him in horror. Your body is different from before. You have the smell of origami. No, it's even stronger than origami. Godwa, this is for you. It should taste good. Dean didn't answer it. After exploring its memory, it had lost all value to him. It was the most suitable reward for the goddess of Wa. Godwa smiled sweetly like a pure and beautiful girl. But there was a strange hunger in her eyes, which made her look slightly enchanting. It was the first time for Noyce and the others to see the expression of this indescribably beautiful girl change. Many of them were stunned, but the next moment, Goddess Wa suddenly opened her mouth. Her red lips suddenly expanded to several meters, revealing her mouth full of sharp teeth. Then, she swallowed the worm in one gulp. The action was so fast that the people who were fascinated by her almost screamed out in fear. Goddess Wa licked her lips and grinned at the crowd, her face full of enjoyment. Many people were so scared that they couldn't help but retreat. Noyce, Aurora, and others were scared, but they had been following Dean for a long time. Their courage had been tempered. Although they were scared out of their wits, they quickly restored their calmness. Chapter 1237. Dean slowly closed his eyes, and the body structure of the extreme ice worm king appeared in his mind. In the next moment, his body split into a mass of flesh and blood, and it kept changing. After 10 minutes, the mass of flesh and blood gradually changed into the appearance of the extreme ice worm king. When the last step was completed, an ice worm king appeared in front of Dean. When the connection was cut off, its body also stopped moving, as if it was dead. Dean didn't input the memory into it. He didn't need the Ice Worm King to work for him. He just needed to use its body to bring strength to Noyce and others and enhance their combat effectiveness, creating legendary soul worms, extreme ice worms, and extreme ice worm king, which was also known as source worms. Dean's construction speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, he had created a set of resources that could allow people to evolve from the abyss to the king stage. Dean handed Noyce over to Noyce. He wanted Noyce to be the first king. With his help, Noyce quickly absorbed the legendary soul worm and evolved his cells. He then absorbed the extreme ice worm and quickly climbed from the lower abyss to the upper abyss. Due to the rapid advancement, Noyce didn't have time to eliminate the impurities that were brought to his body by the soul worm. In less than half an hour, Noyce successfully advanced to king level after absorbing 2 soul worms. Moreover, unlike other kings, Noyce's consciousness wouldn't be disturbed by the Ice Worm King. He would always be free. This exaggerated scene left everyone dumbfounded. It was as if they were watching a show. They were completely dumbfounded. Dean let Noyce use his strength to attack him. After testing, it proved that Noyce indeed had the strength of a king. However, he was very unfamiliar with using it. He hadn't fully controlled the power in his body. Mass production of king level. This is the ability of a god. No wonder the origami and the magic insects are searching for a god. Once they become a god, what can't be solved? Dean was happy, but he couldn't help but sigh. On that day, he asked Goddess what to help him. The two of them made soul worms and source worms together. With Dean's speed, he could construct a set of all the resources needed to evolve to the king level every half an hour or so. Goddess only needed 5 or 6 minutes, and her speed was gradually increasing. Dean didn't allow the king level to proliferate. He promoted Aurora, Noyce, Sergei, and the others to the king level. As for their cronies, they were given to them to train in the future. Dean thought about the memories he got from the manager of the merchant house. The Demon Emperor did come back to the imperial capital. As for whether he left or not, it was something that the manager didn't know. He got up and left the merchant house. He took Noyce and the others to the imperial capital. The demon kings had fallen, and the demon emperors had secluded themselves in the royal palace. Currently, all kinds of dragons and snakes were rising up in the imperial capital. The Abyss Masters under the command of the Demon Kings and the Abyss Masters of some ancient families had all appeared to investigate the situation and attempt to seize the territories left behind by the Demon Kings. Although the banners of the Demon Kings were still flying high, the armies and businesses under them had already been torn apart, and there was endless internal strife. After the Demon Emperor returned, he took action to suppress the turmoil in the imperial capital. However, after that, he stayed in the royal palace for a long time, causing rumors and slanders to spread everywhere. The various experts were still restless. There's only one king left in the imperial capital. He's the only king who didn't participate in the Federation War. After the Demon Emperor is killed, the imperial capital will be a group of dragons without a leader. In Dean's eyes, there was no difference between a king and an ordinary person. His vision and mind had become more open after helping Noyce and the others to evolve their bodies. He had the aura of overlooking everything in the world. Ordinary people cultivated their temperament with their clothes. Rulers cultivated their temperament with their wealth and power. Emperors cultivated their temperament with their territory. Dean led Noyce and the others to the palace. He spread his perception domain to perceive the daily scenes of the imperial capital. 2 hours later, they came to the central core area of the imperial capital. The imperial city. Standing outside the city, Dean's perception extended forward and covered the entire imperial city. Soon he felt that the scene in the imperial city was different from the past. It was slightly chaotic. He heard a lot of secret conversations of families and saw a lot of dirty things. Everyone's privacy was exposed in front of his eyes, but he didn't feel it. Dean saw the palace in the center of the imperial city. Everything was in order. Is he still here? Dean's eyes flashed. He thought that the Demon Emperor would escape and stay far away from the imperial capital. After all, the Demon Emperor didn't even care about the Federation's army when he retreated. But now the imperial palace was heavily guarded, and there was no sign of chaos. It could be seen that the Demon Emperor was still inside. Dean suddenly understood that the reason why the Demon Emperor abandoned the Federation's army was because he knew that he wouldn't have time to manage the imperial capital. Moreover, the imperial capital would be in turmoil after losing the rule of the Seven Kings. If the Demon Emperor brought a large number of troops back, then the turmoil would become more intense. Even before the Demon Emperor attacked the imperial capital, there would be an extremely unbearable situation. If that was the case, then Dean had to admire the determination of the Devil Emperor. He was a ruthless person. Let me see what gives you the confidence to sit in the imperial capital. Dudian's eyes flashed as he strode forward. They entered the imperial city and went all the way to the imperial palace. Dean's perception penetrated all over the imperial palace. He saw a metal spaceship buried deep in the ground. His perception couldn't penetrate into the spaceship, but he searched the entire palace. He only saw a few concubines. He didn't see the shadow of the Demon Emperor. It seemed that the Demon Emperor was hiding in the spaceship. Was it a trap or an evasion? Dean didn't rush to attack, but looked at Noyce. Go to the imperial palace and grab me 2 concubines of the Demon Emperor. Noyce was stunned. This was the core of the imperial capital. The strongest person in the imperial capital lived there. He was also the ruler of the giant wall. But he wanted to go to the palace where the demon emperor lived and grab his concubines. Noyce was surprised, but he quickly nodded as he thought about Dean. His figure disappeared from a place. He passed through the guards in front of the imperial palace and went to the depths of the palace. After a while, there was some chaos in the imperial palace. Then, Noyce's figure turned back, carrying two women who were dressed extremely luxuriously. Even their accessories were extremely luxurious. Both of them were in their early 20s. They were breathtakingly beautiful. There was a special pattern on their faces. Their eyes were indifferent and arrogant. They didn't seem to have any emotion. Although they were embarrassed after being thrown to the ground by Noyce, they soon raised their proud heads. There was a bit of anger on their beautiful and enchanting faces. They glared at Dean. "Who are you? How dare you break into the imperial palace? Take off your human skin," Dean indifferently said. He raised his hand and slapped. His 5 fingers were like several sharp blades that slashed out, leaving bloody marks on the two women's bodies. Sensing that their lives were in danger, the pupils of the two girls constricted. Their clothes were suddenly torn apart, and their bodies expanded, raising a stinky wind like a hurricane. In the blink of an eye, they turned into two monsters more than 10 meters tall. Messy tentacles covered their bodies, hideous eyeballs, and disordered mouths were everywhere. They were even more horrifying than most of the monsters that were known for their horrifying appearances. They were as beautiful as a god, but as ugly as a devil. Noyce, who had personally captured them, was shocked. He didn't expect these two beautiful women to be such terrifying and disgusting monsters. Aurora and the others all retreated in fright, frightened by this terrifying image. Dean had seen the true face of the origami from the memories of Crimson Moon, Lin Changsheng, and Bolo. He was not surprised at this moment and was indifferent. He smiled faintly and said, "In your origami race, your image should be considered as beautiful, right?" The two origami let out a sharp and ear-piercing cry. It sounded like they were roaring as they pounced towards Dean. Dean's expression was indifferent. He raised his hand, and his fingers turned into two giant cages. The two origami were imprisoned in the cages. Several giant thorns came out from the cages and pierced into the bodies of the two origami. It didn't take long for him to read the memories of the two origami. "Sure enough, you're back." Dean threw the two origami to Goddess Wa. "Here you go." Goddess Wa smiled and raised her hand. Her slender palm became bigger like a strange mouth. There was a bottomless whirlpool in the center of her palm. Dense teeth could be faintly seen. The two origami were sucked into the whirlpool. After a moment, her arm returned to its original shape. "Dismantle the spaceship," Dean said to God of Wa. From a memory of the two origami, Dean knew that the Demon Emperor was hiding inside the spaceship. With the Demon Emperor's plan, he wouldn't expect a spaceship to be able to protect him. It was most likely a trap. Dean's strength was not the same as before, but he wasn't blindly confident. There were many things that happened when the ship was overturned. Chapter 1238. "Oh," Gadawa responded. It seemed that Dean had asked her to do a trivial matter. She lightly jumped and landed outside the walls of the Imperial Palace. When the guards at the gate saw Goddess Wa descending from the sky, they were stunned by her beautiful face. It took them a while to react. When one of the guards was about to step forward and ask for her identity, he saw the beautiful girl raise her hand, and her arm suddenly expanded. Her snow-white arm turned into a blood-red limb that looked like it was cast from lava, looking hideous and horrible. Bang! Gadawa slapped down with her gigantic arm. The walls of the palace collapsed, and the dust rose. Her arm was like an iron lock that penetrated through the ground. She touched the ancient spaceship in the depths of the Imperial Palace. Her arm turned into a soft rubber that wrapped around the spaceship and pulled it up. The buildings on the ground trembled violently. The entire Imperial Palace, and even the entire Imperial City, felt the vibration. Soon, a ring-shaped spaceship was pulled out of the dust and was thrown to the ground next to the Imperial Palace. Noyce and others were shocked. They didn't expect that the silent girl who followed Dean would have such a terrifying power. How many tons of power would it take to pull such a huge spaceship out of the ground? Puff! The thin, soft tissues wrapped around the spaceship shrunk rapidly, turning into sharp blades that pierced out fiercely. The spaceship was hit by the sharp blades. Sparks sputtered out. There were a few dents on the surface of the spaceship, but it didn't break. Goddess was a little surprised. Suddenly, one of the sharp blades turned into a soft liquid and covered the spaceship. A moment later, the soft liquid turned back into a sharp blade and shot out again, piercing a hole in the metal shell of the spaceship. Seeing that it was effective, a cold glint flashed across the surface of the other blades, and they stabbed forward again. Wham! The surface of the spaceship lit up with a blue fluorescent light. It was like a protective shield that blocked the countless blades. However, it didn't last long before it broke. However, the power of the blades was greatly reduced after being blocked by the protective shield. At this moment, a sinister voice came from the spaceship. I don't want to be your enemy. Don't bully me too much. If you really force me into a dead end, even if I die, I'll drag you down with me. Dean couldn't help but feel strange. Didn't you know that I would come? Isn't it too late to say these words? If you had taken the initiative to surrender to me, then maybe I would have spared your life. Submit? Dream on. The Demon Emperor said angrily. I don't want to be your enemy, so you'd better not provoke me. On the way here, didn't you look around? I've buried nuclear weapons in every corner of the Imperial City. This is something you humans invented. Once I detonate them, the entire Imperial City will fall. With such a large area, you can't escape. Dean used his perception to penetrate into the nearby corners of the ground. He saw that there were nuclear weapons scattered in different locations. He only paid attention to the surface and ignored them. After all, he didn't think that the Demon Emperor would drag the entire Imperial City to be buried with him. Do you think nuclear bombs are useful against a god? Dean indifferently said, I thought that you would prepare some means to deal with it. I didn't expect that it would be such a boring thing. So you don't want to let me go? The Demon Emperor gritted his teeth. Then let's die together. Dean frowned. He could guess the Demon Emperor's plan through the layout of the surroundings. It was obvious that there were nuclear weapons buried in the spaceship. The Demon Emperor would be the first to bear the brunt of the nuclear bomb once it was detonated. He would be in the center of the explosion and would have to bear the high temperature of hundreds of millions of degrees. Everything on the earth would be melted in front of such temperature. Even a god would be seriously injured or even killed. However, the effect would be different if he was prepared. Be careful. Dean didn't have time to dictate to Goddess Wa, so he used telepathy to pass a message to her. As soon as Goddess Wa received the message, her entire body was covered with a large amount of scarlet magma-like carapace, like a blood-red lotus, covering her body layer by layer. Boom! There wasn't any warning as the explosion echoed. Dean spread out a large number of tentacles to pull Noise and the others behind the giant lotus. Nevertheless, the impact of the explosion made Dean's heart contract. They were very close to the spaceship at the moment. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were in the center of the nuclear weapons. It was the first time that he was so close to the nuclear weapons. It was as if he was facing the god of death. All of this happened in an instant. Dean had just passed the message when the Demon Emperor's voice fell. Dazzling light burst out and illuminated the world like it was daytime. It was as if a flame had risen and erupted on the planet. Countless people in the Imperial City looked up in shock. When the scorching white light pierced through heaven and earth, it also pierced through their retinas. Countless people's eyes began to tear and bleed. Before they could even cry out in pain, the ground began to rumble. It was as if a huge wave was pushing against them. All of their senses were instantly numbed, and they lost all sense of perception. Boom! A huge mushroom cloud exploded in the Imperial City. The violent tremors could be felt by all the cities in the Imperial capital. Countless people looked towards the Imperial capital, the place where the sovereign reigned over the world. They could see a flash of light erupting from the horizon. Even if they were hundreds of miles away, they could still see that the sky was illuminated with a blazing white light. At this moment, the entire imperial capital, which was filled with turbulent undercurrents, fell into silence. Everyone was shocked by this huge tremor. A tall figure wearing a hat was on the top of a mountain dozens of miles away from the imperial city. He raised his hand to cover his eyes as he squinted at the blooming white sun in front of him. The mushroom cloud slowly rose, and a gust of wind blew away the hood covering his face. A handsome face was revealed. It was a face that everyone in the imperial city knew. I didn't expect that the first god born on Earth would be so close to a human. Moreover, this kid seems to have obtained Lin Chongqing's memory and become a quasi-god. He muttered to himself, and then sneered. Millions of people will accompany you to be buried. You won't be a disgrace to your identity as a quasi-god. As for this god, even if nuclear weapons can't kill you, we can wait for our fleet to come and destroy this planet. The power of the planet's explosion should be enough to bury a god who hasn't grown up yet. I'm already a quasi-god. Even if I don't have this planet, I can slowly improve in the future. Sooner or later, I will evolve into a god. My race will rule this universe. We won't die because of hunger. We will become eternal. Chapter 1239. Rumble. The earth trembled and shook violently. The incandescent pillar of light enveloped the entire imperial city. When the pillar of light dissipated, all that was left was a huge mushroom cloud that rose into the sky and a cloud of smoke that covered the sun. The once flourishing imperial city that countless citizens of the imperial capital felt extremely glorious when they visited had been razed to the ground under the cloud of dust. All that was left was scorched earth, like a bloody wound that had been torn open in the earth. Smoke and blood were rising from the wound. Vibration. Violent vibration. Dean could feel that all the soil above and around his head was contracting and trembling. It was like a frightened animal was shrinking its pores. In addition, the blazing heat swept over from all directions, completely filling and enveloping his senses. It was as if he was bathed in a pool of boiling hot blood. At this moment, he felt so insignificant. Compared to the entire Earth, he was like a mosquito on a human body, or not even a mosquito, but a tiny bacterium. The mechanical heart in his chest was operating at full speed. He could almost hear the buzzing sound of the mechanical heart. The tissues outside his body were frantically splitting and reassembling, spewing out blazing flames that mixed with the temperature of the outside world. He did not create ice to weaken this terrifying temperature. Otherwise, the constantly melting ice would turn into steam, and even Noise and the others would be cooked. On the contrary, he used low-temperature flames to gradually resist the terrifying temperature of the nuclear explosion. He mechanically created new bodies to resist the high temperature. He didn't know how much time had passed, but the temperature gradually decreased. At the same time, Dean felt that goddess had taken them to a very deep place in the ground. They were far away from the center of the nuclear explosion. Dean asked what to take them to another place after the situation gradually calmed down. Whoosh! The lotus leaf-like tentacle of goddess war wrapped around Dean, Noise, and the others. It moved forward rapidly and appeared in a rock formation hundreds of miles away from the ground. A scorching wind blew as they came to the surface. Noise and others who were under Dean's shelter felt as if they were inhaling flames. They coughed violently. Dean looked at the green space outside the imperial city from a distance. But at the moment it was scorched earth. His vision shifted to the nuclear explosion area. The high temperature in the air became distorted. The entire imperial city had disappeared, leaving behind only a piece of scorched earth that had not grown a single blade of grass for decades. Dean was startled. Even he was surprised by the Demon Emperor's generosity. He felt that he was too narrow-minded. If he was a bit bigger, then he might be able to think of this point. However, he knew the potential of God of War, so he didn't panic when he found the missiles buried in the city. The explosion of the nuclear bomb wasn't much of a threat to him, but it was a pity for the imperial city. This was the lair of the Demon Emperor. No one knew how many secrets of the wildness god were buried here. But now they were all gone along with the people of the city. Are you okay? Dean looked at God of Wa, who was still in the lotus shape. Hearing this, Goddess Wa retracted a few lotus leaves and revealed a huge snow-white face. She said obediently, "I'm fine. It's a pity that this thing exploded too fast. If it were a little slower, I would have absorbed and eaten it all. It must be delicious." Dean was stunned. Swallowing the nuclear bomb? He thought about it carefully. He felt that what God of Wa said wasn't completely impossible. As long as the speed of energy absorption could catch up with the speed of the explosion, then they could synchronize the conversion. But it was difficult. It was impossible for him. After all, the mechanical heart had its limits. But God of Wa was a true god. She had infinite potential. Perhaps she could do it if she practiced more. God is a terrible thing. Dean was surprised. He turned around and used his X-ray vision to check the situation. He found that only 2 of Aurora's cronies were far away. They didn't have enough time to reach God of Wa. The rest of the people were basically fine. They just had some burns. The entire Imperial City is gone. Oh my God! Teacher, is this the work of the demon emperor who ruled the giant wall? Noise and the others looked around and saw the mountains and forests in the distance. They vaguely recognized where they were and were shocked. The Imperial City had left a deep impression on them. It was gorgeous, majestic, and magnificent. But now, there was nothing left except for the scorched earth. Such a move was simply destructive. Dean nodded. He felt that there was a trace of strangeness. It seemed that he had overlooked something. Using tens of millions of people in the Imperial City to accompany me in death. Although this demon emperor's actions were generous and fitting of his identity, his actions before his death were a little strange. Dean recalled the previous events. The demon emperor's performance was slightly impetuous. He didn't have the calm demeanor of a strategist. Of course, it might be because he was forced into a desperate situation and exposed his camouflage nature. Many people were calm because they didn't have the strength to do so. But the strange thing was that with this demon emperor's personality, there was no way that she would stay here and wait for death, perishing together with him. After all, even if nuclear bombs could scare him off this time, what about the second time? It wasn't a long-term solution. If he was the demon emperor, then he would never use such a stupid means to save his life. The demon emperor didn't admit defeat during the negotiation. He was so tough, but his final means was to die together. This feeling, it was as if he didn't plan to live and was ready to detonate the nuclear bomb. If that was the case, then why did he say those meaningless words to expose his thoughts? If the nuclear bomb exploded without warning, then the damage to him would be more serious, and he might even be killed. Dean woke up as he thought about all kinds of strange things. Maybe the self-destructing demon emperor was just a recording or a stand-in. The real demon emperor wasn't dead yet. He looked up and swept around. His perception swept out and covered the nearby mountains and forests. If the demon emperor wasn't dead, then he would pay attention to the situation here. His perception domain expanded to the extreme and locked all the animals within hundreds of miles. But he didn't sense the aura of the demon emperor. What a cautious fellow. Has he already left? He even erased his scent. Dean's eyes lit up as he retracted his perception network. In any case, he was 100% sure that the demon emperor wasn't dead. Since he wasn't dead, then he must be hiding in the dark to continue his plan. All the concubines in the Imperial City are origami. It seems that the demon emperor isn't the only one in the origami family. There must be a mother seed to continue the future generations. Dean's eyes lit up as he pondered for a moment. He temporarily suppressed the investigation of the Devil Emperor. The latter was hiding in the dark and had extraordinary wisdom. It was almost impossible to find him. It was better to finish his own business first. Now the Demon Emperor had retreated, and the imperial capital had almost fallen into his hands. The world of the earth was almost in his hands. I'll train a group of kings in my spare time after I find Aisha. I don't believe that I can't find a trace of the Demon Emperor. Dean didn't care even if he couldn't find the Demon Emperor. After all, it was almost impossible to assassinate the Demon Emperor with his current identity. Even if the Demon Emperor used the power of science and technology to launch long-range weapons like intercontinental missiles to attack the area where he was located, it wouldn't be able to hurt him. He just needed to enjoy the fruits of his victory. He would send people to track down the Demon Emperor and make the latter a stray dog hiding in the shadows until it was unbearable. He felt the trace of unhappiness in his heart dissipate. He turned around and left with Noise, God of Wa, and the others to recover the entire imperial capital. He wanted to finish at the end of the month and take a week off next month to start a new book, but it seemed that he couldn't rest. Chapter 1240. Dean gave the task of recovering the imperial capital to Noise and Aurora, not only to train them, but also because he didn't have time to manage these trivial matters. He parted ways with Noise and others after leaving the imperial capital. He went to find the last king of the imperial capital. "Are you the tyrant king?" Dean and Vaiwa appeared in the king's castle. They were like transparent shadows that penetrated through the window of the king's study room. Sitting in the study was a tall and slender blonde youth. His cheeks were handsome and long, and he looked a little mean. His light red eyes were very calm, and his whole body had the elegance of a noble. He did not live up to his reputation of being fierce and fierce. "Who are you?" The golden-haired young man raised his eyes slightly, and a hint of seriousness flashed in his eyes. To be able to sneak past the detection of his guards and arrive here, even if he wasn't a king tier, he wouldn't be far from it. "Let me take a look at your little head." Dean raised his hand. His palm was getting bigger and bigger in front of the blonde youth's eyes. "Courting death." The blonde youth's eyes flashed red. Among the 7 kings, he was the most easily angered, so he had such a nickname. Dean's unauthorized intrusion had already angered him, but now he took the initiative to attack. He felt that he was about to lose his mind. His whole body bulged, and the aristocratic dress on the outside was instantly torn, revealing his huge, demonic body. However, several sharp blades suddenly shot out from the palm that was stretching toward him. They were as fast as light beams. Before he could see them clearly, they had already pierced through his neck, shoulder blades, ribs, chest, and other parts of his body. In particular, one of the sharp blades had pierced through half an inch from his heart. If he moved slightly, his beating heart would be cut open. The blonde youth's pupils shrank. There was a look of disbelief in his eyes. Such a fast change of body didn't conform to his logic at all. "Be quiet if you don't want to die," Dean indifferently said. The blonde youth was easily out of control, but he was able to control his anger in some moments. For example, he was facing the king of light and the devil. At this moment, feeling that his life was no longer under his control, he quickly controlled his anger. Thinking of the tremors from before, his expression changed. "The tremors from before were caused by you. That's because the devil wanted to perish together with me. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it," Dudian indifferently said. The golden-haired youth was stunned. This sentence contained too much information, and it was too shocking. Dean didn't pay attention to his shock. He extended his tentacles and plunged into his brain to read his memories. A moment later, he retracted his tentacles and the sharp blades that were stabbed into the origami's body. He furrowed his brows. He did not expect the Demon Emperor to have hidden himself so deeply. Even the king did not know about his secrets, let alone the whereabouts of the other origami. This tyrant king was just like the other kings. He was just a slave of the Demon Emperor. The true servant was the extreme Ice Bug King in their heads. "From now on, you will follow me." Dean felt a little bored and told him. The tyrant king's eyes were sluggish for a moment. He gradually recovered and respectfully said, "Yes, sir. Thank you for helping me get rid of that abominable extreme Ice Bug King." "I didn't help you get rid of it. I just erased its consciousness," Dudian said indifferently. In addition to going through the memories, he had also entered some new memories into the mind of the tyrant king. For example, he told them that he had helped the tyrant erase the consciousness of the extreme Ice Worm King and what had happened in the imperial city. The fastest way to make people surrender was to let them see your strength. "Sir, I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you." The tyrant king knelt down on one knee. This was the etiquette to meet the Demon Emperor. From the memories given by Dean, he saw the Demon Emperor die in the Imperial City. He also saw Dean's extraordinary strength. At this moment, he did not feel wrong to treat Dean with such etiquette. The Imperial City is in chaos now. Go and help my friends to suppress the Imperial City. Restore order as soon as possible. Dean said, "Yes, sir." The Tyrant King nodded respectfully. However, he sighed in his heart. He had just bid farewell to the Demon Emperor, and now he had to welcome a new master. He was always being ridden on the neck. It was difficult to turn the situation around. It was a pity that he could do nothing about it. The aftershocks of a nuclear explosion spread throughout the Imperial City. All the forces immediately launched the intelligence network to contact the spies in the Imperial City to inquire about the situation. However, there was no news. Therefore, they had to send new spies to the Imperial City to inquire about the situation. Just as the various powers were gathering, there was suddenly news that a deity had descended and killed a great emperor. The great emperor had committed a heinous crime. He had offended the god and was punished by the wrath of the god. The great emperor had committed a heinous crime. At first, people did not believe it. However, the news that the Imperial City had been razed to the ground spread. At the same time, there was more evidence to prove that the Imperial City had disappeared. For a time, the entire Imperial City was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked by this shocking news. It was equivalent to the people of a country suddenly hearing that their capital had disappeared. Without the capital, there would be no great emperor and countless upper-class nobles who maintained the country. Thinking of such an outcome, not only did the commoners not feel happy about regaining their freedom, but they were also anxious. Like homeless orphans, they felt uneasy and hoped that some big shot would appear above them to lead them and point them in new direction. Soon, such a person appeared. Noyce and others arrived with the attitude of a king and suppressed all sides. All the forces that were ready to make a move fiercely resisted. They used all means to fight back against Noyce and others. They even created public opinion to win the will of the people. They created all kinds of rumors and so on. However, the strongest of the giants in the Imperial City was the Lord of the Abyss. Under the suppression of the absolute strength of Noyce and others, they quickly became obedient. Some of them took the initiative to surrender while others vowed to die. They fought against the soldiers under their command. In the end, they were slaughtered. There were also some ancient families who were unwilling to be suppressed and replaced in such a turbulent time. They used all the resources of their families to fight back. But in the end, their entire families were erased and completely exterminated. When one of the former 7 kings, the Tyrant King, appeared to protect the new king, all the forces in the Imperial City knew that the situation had come to an end. These kings had joined forces, and they no longer had a chance. The bloodbath and massacre continued for half a month. The entire imperial capital was shrouded in a hazy, blood-red color. The aristocratic families were wiped out one after another. The military leaders who held great power were unwilling to surrender and were sent to the guillotine. The entire imperial city was trembling. The old master and the new master were replaced. It was destined to be a bloodbath. Even ordinary civilians didn't dare to go on the streets. Many academies even closed their doors. Some academies organized students to resist, but they were also mercilessly suppressed. Bloody and brutal, the suppression of the imperial city was far more violent than that of the Federation. Everything was bloody and undisguised. In the continuous slaughter, the voices of resistance gradually disappeared, and the voices of doubt also stopped appearing. Everyone was very careful with what they said. Even the inexperienced children knew what to say and what not to say. They didn't even dare to ask questions, because that would invite a beating from their parents. People would forget a topic after a long time after it became taboo. It was as if it never existed. This bloody and dark history was destined not to be recorded. 20 days later, the order in the imperial city had been restored. There are very few voices of dispute. Noyce, Aurora, Mason, and others were kings. They raised their flags, and took over the former Seven Kings' forces and territories. Dean asked Noyce and others to send messages to the giant wall after the order in the imperial city was restored. At the same time, the imperial army was sent to the abyss to search for traces of Aisha. He personally drew a portrait of Aisha. His extraordinary body control made the painting lifelike. It was as if the painting came to life. This painting also spread throughout the imperial capital, and she became the most famous woman in the imperial capital in a short time. /3_3610/ Chapter 1241. Noyce and the others used their status as the king as an example. They led the army to open up the abyss and look for traces of Aisha. Other independent adventure organizations were also involved in the search for Aisha. There was no other reason but that this was a mission issued by the new emperor of the empire. The reward was so generous that countless people were jealous. No one could resist. In addition to the reward of a city, they would help to fulfill a wish. Any wish, including resurrection of the dead. In addition, the person who completed the task would become the king of all living beings. Whether it was the thugs who pursued power and wealth, or the people who had no desires, it was difficult to resist such temptation. Who in this world didn't have a wish and obsession to fulfill? In addition to the imperial capital, Wyvern patrollers took the portrait and Dean's mission to the giant wall. They spread the news to every inhabited corner of the empire. Even the walls surrounding the empire were the first to receive the news. Once there was a trace of the person in the portrait, they would immediately intercept it and report it to the higher-ups. On the first day of the task, Dean received the news that someone had found the man in the painting. When the news came, he was so excited that he almost jumped up. He immediately went to greet them and saw a few nervous and timid adventurers standing in the hall of the newly built imperial palace. Beside them was a metal cage, and inside it was a graceful figure in ragged clothes who was wrapped in chains. Aisha? Dean was startled. He found that it wasn't Aisha, although the appearance was 70% or 80% similar, but the smell was completely different. There was no bloodline power of the demon dragon clan in her body. Is this the person you are looking for? Dean asked straightforwardly. His boiling heart had cooled down. There was a bit of killing intent in his voice. The adventurers shivered as they were stared at by Dean's majestic eyes. One of them braced himself and said, "Reporting back to the Emperor, this is the person we found in the painting. Shit." Dean roared as he waved his hand. Several people in the hall turned into powder. Nothing was left. They didn't even have time to scream or react. After killing a few people, Dadian raised his hand and smashed the unconscious undead in the metal cage. Together with the cage, they were flattened. Noyce and Mason didn't expect Dean to be so angry. They rarely saw Dean in such a big temper. Even if he was in a dangerous situation, he wouldn't be so out of control and angry. He wouldn't easily kill people. Although the number of people who died in Dean's hands was uncountable, but Dean's principle of killing people was to benefit himself and not to kill innocent people. Dadian's anger hadn't dissipated yet. He shouted at the two, "If anyone doesn't wipe their eyes and bring this garbage to the prize, they will be punished with death by 1,000 cuts." Noyce was shocked, as he didn't expect Dean's anger to spread to them. He faintly felt that Dean was slightly different from the Dean he used to follow, but he couldn't tell the specific difference. "Yes," he hurriedly replied. Dean saw that he was about to leave, but suddenly called out, "Wait." Noyce quickly stopped. Dean frowned. The anger in his heart had subsided. He thought for a moment and shook his head. "Forget it. Some people are not deliberately pretending to receive the prize. If we are too harsh, they will be scared off. If they really meet her, they may not dare to confirm that they have met the real person and dare not come to report." Noyce nodded. "I think so too." Dean looked at him. "Block the news of today's matter. Don't spread it out." "I will," Noyce replied. Dean nodded and left the hall. He returned to his study room. The next day, there was another news. Dean's excitement was extinguished once again as he saw that it wasn't the real Aisha. But he didn't get angry this time. He just asked Noyce to give him some gold coins. There was news almost every day for several days. But without exception, none of them were the real Aisha. Dean gradually lost his patience. He didn't have much expectation when he heard the news again. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Aisha still hadn't been found. There wasn't even a trace of her. But on this day, the special envoy of the Fire Dragon country came to the imperial capital. Dean greeted him, and the envoy immediately stated the reason. It was to express allegiance to the Chelan king of the Fire Dragon country. The Fire Dragon country was willing to submit to him unconditionally. Noyce and others were shocked as the news came out, especially the Tyrant King. The Fire Dragon country bordered their border, and they had been in conflict for more than 200 years. They had never backed down. He was worried that the Fire Dragon country would send troops to invade the imperial capital after the death of the Demon Emperor. He didn't expect to receive a letter of surrender. "Your Majesty, is it a trap?" Noyce was the first to ask. He had learned to change the way he addressed Dean. He didn't call Dean young master anymore. He was keenly aware that the Dean in front of him wasn't the young master of the past. He was a real cold-blooded and cruel emperor. Dudian raised his hand and grabbed the envoy. He didn't wait for the envoy to resist, as he forcibly explored the envoy's memory. Soon he saw the Chelan king's memory. He also saw the Chelan king's expression when he passed the order. What surprised him was that the latter's attitude was very respectful when he passed the order. It seemed that the latter's eyes weren't looking at the envoy who was in front of him, but at Dean who was looking at the envoy's memory. Moreover, after the Chelan Dragon King had passed down the order, he also recited the language of the magic worm in the form of a tone. It was a greeting to Dean, expressing his sincere intention to surrender. Dean retracted his tentacles and shook off the envoy. His eyes flashed with a cold light. It seemed that the envoy knew his situation very well. Perhaps the Chelan king was there during the Federation War, but he was hiding in the dark. "Emperor," the envoy's face was pale. He stood up tremblingly and looked at Dean in horror. Dean coldly snorted. "Go back and tell the little dragon not to act smart. Hand over the military power of the Fire Dragon country and let the Imperial Army take over." The envoy's face changed. He wanted to say something, but Dean swept him out of the hall. Dean asked Noyce after the Fire Dragon envoy left. "Haven't found Aisha? Have you searched all the places?" "Not yet." Noyce felt Dean's gaze. He didn't dare to look directly at Dean's eyes. He bowed his head. "Most of the areas have been searched. I've found many monsters and undeads. I've also found some corpses that have learned the human language. There are only a few taboo places that haven't been explored. Even the king doesn't dare to step into those places." Chapter 1242. Dean frowned as he thought of the forest of despair outside the giant wall. The mutated plants that inhabited the underground had almost cost him his life. Most of the plants had deformed or mutated into new species due to environmental factors such as soil and air radiation. Some mutated plants had simple consciousness. They were bloodthirsty and ferocious. They would hunt like monsters. The probability of the birth of such plants was 1 in a billion. But every plant that was born would become a huge hidden danger. Whether it was humans or monsters, they didn't care about the plants around them. It provided a natural umbrella for them when they were young. It allowed them to attack the monsters and humans passing by. In addition, they could absorb nutrients from the soil. They would never lack food. Every area where plants were active was marked as a life forbidden zone by the Empire. The forest of despair outside the giant wall was one of them. Trivial forbidden zones dare to stop my footsteps. Gather fire energy warriors and flatten all the forbidden zones. Dudian frowned as he said in a cold tone. He wanted to flatten all the forbidden zones that the Devil Emperor didn't bother to clean up. The whole world was under his feet. So what was a mere forbidden zone? Noyce was startled. "Yes. If we can't find any news of her within a week, then reduce the army by 30% and send her to hard labor." Dudian looked at Noyce mercilessly. Noyce felt great pressure. "Yes, Your Majesty, I understand." After leaving the hall, Noyce felt a little lighter. He was relieved from the extremely uncomfortable and severe pressure. He sighed and secretly smiled. He walked out of the Imperial Palace. As soon as he came outside the wall, he saw Macon hurriedly coming. "Is there any news?" Noyce's eyes lit up as he asked. Macon was stunned. He shook his head and smiled. "No, I just came to ask about the transfer of the border guards." Noyce was startled. "I advise you to wait for such a small matter. He is in a bad mood." Mason looked at him and asked, "What happened? Did he lose his temper again? If he can't find Miss Aisha, he will reduce the number by 30%. Noyce smiled bitterly. Macon smiled. "It's just disarmament. It's not a big deal. The whole world is ours. It's useless to have an army." Noyce opened his mouth slightly, wanting to say something but hesitated. Finally, he said in a deep voice, "This world is won by him, not by us. You'd better not say such things in the future." Macon was stunned and somewhat puzzled. Noyce didn't say anything and left in a hurry. Macon stood in the same place, looking at his back as he left. He slowly frowned thoughtfully. In the blink of an eye, a week had passed. The imperial capital gathered a large number of troops, led by Noyce, Macon, Barton, Rora, Tyrant, and other kings, to destroy one forbidden zone after another. Although these life-forbidden zones were dangerous, and even kings had to be careful when venturing into them alone, even a demigod like the Demon Emperor had to temporarily avoid being bombarded by so many kings and a large number of troops. The kings of the empire led the cavalry to sweep through the major life-forbidden zones. Finally, they found the news about Aisha in one of the life-forbidden zones. The news was quickly reported to Dean. Hierro is a bloodthirsty, demonic flower. It has a very high intelligence. It is entrenched in a huge metal vein that stretches for hundreds of miles. The demonic flower lives on top of the vein and feeds on gold and blood. The leader of the corpses has developed intelligence and is conspiring with the demonic flower to lure nearby monsters and adventurers to come close and hunt them down. Noyce slowly reported the situation to Dean. "We found the corpses after killing the demonic flower. We found traces of Miss Aisha in the brain of the leader of the corpses." Under his signal, his trusted subordinates brought over a huge metal cage and a huge tray. Locked inside the metal cage was a 5-meter-tall corpse king with long fangs and fingers as sharp as a zombie's. The corpse king did not struggle or resist, as it knew that struggling was useless. However, after coming to this hall, it instinctively felt an extreme sense of danger, causing fear to rise in its heart. When it saw the extremely handsome young man on the throne, it immediately locked onto the source of the danger. It was this young man. It gently sniffed and recognized that the young man wasn't a corpse nor a human. The smell was very strange. It made it feel thirsty, but the abnormal sense of danger made it resist the hunger. On the tray was a huge stamen. It was incomparably red and glistening. Dean's eyes fell on both of them. He used his X-ray vision to analyze the smallest structure of both of them. The stamen was the life core of the demonic flower Yiluo, which was mentioned by Noyce. At the moment, it was beating like a heart. It still had vitality. It could be refined into an extremely powerful life armor if it was modified a little. It was a natural hunter's armor material. It should be known that the original clothes of the hunter would be torn after the demonization. Therefore, the imperial capital had specially made special soft materials to make hunter's armor. However, the defense was weak. A lot of thoughts flashed through Dean's mind. He had already thought of the use of the demonic flower, Yiluo. Then he threw it to the back of his mind. His eyes burst out a scorching light and fell on the corpse king in the cage. The corpse king couldn't help but tremble in fear. It felt like an ordinary person who had met an undead. It felt like it would be eaten at any time. The next moment, Dean flicked his finger and shot out dozens of meters. He easily cut off the solid metal cage and turned into a bundle of hair. He wrapped the corpse king and pulled it in front of him. The corpse king struggled and wailed as the hair pierced into its brain. A lot of memories emerged in front of its eyes. Dean found a beautiful purple light in those chaotic and bloodthirsty memories. It was a beautiful figure. She was wearing a purple tang suit, and her clothes were stained with blood. She stepped into the Corpse King's territory. Aisha. Dean recognized her at a glance. She was the one he had been looking for, even if the latter's hair was messy and her face was stained with blood. There was a lot of blood on the corner of her mouth. It seemed that she had eaten something bloody, but Dean could still recognize her at a glance. In the following memory, Dean saw Aisha fighting with the Corpse King and defeating it. Her strength was extremely powerful. When he defeated the Zombie King that was at the level of the Lord of the Deep Caves, he had actually crushed it. After defeating the Corpse King, Aisha didn't eat it. Instead, she became the new king of this territory. She cooperated with the demonic flower Jello. She drove many undead to lure nearby adventurers and monsters to this forbidden area. This behavior lasted for 2 or 3 months. Then Aisha left the territory of the demonic flower Jello. She left alone without any undead. Dean's heart tightened. He quickly flipped through the Corpse King's memory, but he didn't see Aisha's figure again. He immediately counted down the Corpse King's memory. He found that Aisha had appeared half a year ago. At that time, he had just entered the Federation and was separated from her in 2 places. The vast land was far apart from each other. Dean couldn't help but grab his chest. Although he didn't have a heart, he still felt a suffocating pain in his chest. He clenched his teeth and once again returned to the memory of the Corpse King and Aisha's first meeting. Then he slowly toured. In this memory, Aisha defeated the Corpse King. Like them, she ate raw meat. She cruelly killed and ate the monsters that wandered into the territory. However, Dean soon saw the difference. Every once in a while, Aisha would soak her body in the water. She wouldn't move until the dust and blood on her body fell off. Then she would get up. This behavior was like a human taking a bath. In addition, when not hunting, she would often sit on the erect corolla of the demonic flower Jello. She would overlook the entire nearby forest. She would look into the distance, at the sun, and be in a daze. Dean was shocked when he saw these behaviors. Was there a second consciousness in Aisha's mind? From Lin Chongqing's research on the undead, he knew that after the undead reached a certain physique, a second consciousness would be born in the brain. Just like the ordinary Corpse King, it had a simple consciousness. And the longer this consciousness was, the smarter and the higher the IQ. Some of the Corpse Kings that had lived for hundreds of years had an IQ that was not lower than that of sophisticated human beings. At this time, Dean also noticed the clothes on Aisha's body. She used to be her favorite purple dress, but now she was wearing it again. It was obviously not the same set she had worn when they parted. So there was only one result, and that was that she found this kind of clothes and put it on. This also showed that she not only had wisdom, but also inherited some of her original preferences. Could it be that she had regained consciousness? Dean's eyelids twitched as he thought of this. He was very excited, but soon he calmed down. If he still had such fantasies before, then after looking through Lin Chongqing's memory, his understanding of the undead was very detailed. He would not have such fantasies anymore. It was impossible for the undead to recover their consciousness by themselves. In Lin Chongqing's experiment, the undead were born with consciousness. Although there weren't many, but about 30% of them inherited some of their preferences. Some of them were born with consciousness which had nothing to do with the past. For example, the undead used to be a gentle and kind person, but the consciousness that was born was cruel, bloodthirsty, sinister, and despicable. Although Dean didn't want to admit it, but Aisha's behavior was in line with the 30% of the undead. The consciousness that was born just inherited some of the preferences of the original personality. If she had recovered her consciousness, she would have gone to Sylvia to find me or return to Sylvia. But she didn't. Dean couldn't help but sigh. He was full of loss and regret. At the beginning of the search for Aisha, he had sent top masters in all aspects to search near the giant wall. But there was no trace of her. It showed that she hadn't returned after leaving. In any case, let's find her first. Let her choose whether to remove or keep the second consciousness. Dean thought in his heart. He threw the Corpse King to Noise. Noyce was startled. He rushed to subdue the Corpse King in order to prevent chaos. From the looks of it, she has the strength of a king. If you can't find her in the Empire, then go outside the Empire. Even if you have to search all the continents and the whole world, you must find her, Dudian said in a cold voice. Noyce, Mason, and others were startled. They didn't expect Dean to be so persistent. They couldn't help but sigh in their hearts, gathering all the resources of the Empire just to find a woman. It was a waste of money and manpower. If they were to search the whole world, then they didn't know how many soldiers would be sacrificed. It was like the ancient beacons teasing the feudal vassals. However, they had followed Dean for the longest time. They knew the significance of Aisha to Dean. Even if Aisha had turned into an undead, Dean wouldn't leave her. He would eat and sleep with her. They couldn't persuade her with just a few words. Therefore, they kept silent. You go. I'll ask the Federation and the Fire Dragon country to mobilize all the troops to search for her. Dean got up and looked at Noyce. I'll go to the Corpse Kingdom in the north. It's not difficult for her to cross the War God's wall with her strength. Maybe we'll find some clues there. I'll be back soon. I'll leave this place to you for the time being. Tell everyone to stay alert and don't slack off. Noyce's heart tightened. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. Soon he sighed and said, yes. 3_3610/. Chapter 1243. Dean asked Aurora to call the god of Wa who was playing in the imperial capital and asked her to accompany them. Although the Northern Corpse Kingdom was nothing to worry about, it couldn't be underestimated. The strength of the Corpse Kingdom wasn't inferior to the Empire. Due to the undead's unlimited growth and a large number of undead brought by the virus at the beginning of the catastrophe, the territory occupied by the Northern Corpse Kingdom was twice as large as the Empire and the Federation combined. It was almost the area of the entire Asian continent in the Old Era. For Lin Changsheng and the Demon Emperor, the Corpse Kingdom didn't have a background to rely on and didn't have wisdom. Although it occupied a large area and had a lot of king-level corpses, it was the least harmful. After all, undead couldn't become gods. A moment later, Goddess Wa came back with Aurora, looking very cheerful. Dean's cold face softened into a smile when he saw her. He asked her to come over and explain the reason. The god of Wa didn't care and didn't think about it. Dean took her out of the imperial palace. He felt that the world was not right as he stepped out of the palace. Everything in the world was hazy with a faint crimson hue. The color was very light. It was difficult for ordinary people to distinguish it, but it was very obvious in Dean's eyes. He couldn't help but be startled. Suddenly, he thought of something and immediately raised his head to look. In the clear blue sky, apart from the scorching sun, in another direction, behind the thin clouds in the distance, there was a blood-red full moon. Blood moon. Dean's pupils shrank. He didn't expect that the blood moon that Lin Changsheng was worried about would come. However, the time was different from what Lin Changsheng knew. It was a month ahead. The arrival of the blood moon means that the Ice Magic Worm spaceship will arrive on Earth. Dean frowned as he thought of the blood moon that Lin Changsheng had experienced. Whenever the Ice Magic Worm came to the Earth to inspect the experimental base, Lin Changsheng would hide in the virtual brain in advance and erase all the data about his existence, including the rumors about him in the Federation. The related people who were familiar with him would naturally clean up the information, such as Jacelity. The Ice Magic Worm that arrived on Earth could make Lin Changsheng, who had mastered demigod strength, to be so cautious. Although it wasn't a true god, but it was more than enough to crush a demigod. Moreover, the Ice Demon Bug possessed extraordinary technology and had the highest authority of the Federation's artificial intelligence system. It could forcefully restart the machinery hive mind, which was a fatal threat to Lin Changsheng. However, now that the mechanical heart was in Dean's hands, even if it was restarted, it wouldn't affect him. They should be ready to land on Earth. The first place they will go to is the Federation. After collecting data from the Federation, they will know about the changes in the Federation. They will either choose to escape or come to me. Dean's eyes flashed coldly. He immediately changed his mind. He postponed going to the Corpse Kingdom. He would first solve the ice monster worm that had landed in the Federation. To him, although these demonic ice bugs could deal with a demigod, they were still worlds apart from a true god. With the help of Goddess Wa, it would be a piece of cake to kill them. Perhaps he could learn some secrets about the undead from these ice demon bugs. Now that he was standing at the top of the world, he knew many secrets behind the scenes. There weren't many secrets that he didn't know. The Walking Dead virus was one of them, and it was the one he wanted to know the most. Goddess Wa didn't have her own opinion in front of Dean. She agreed immediately when Dean said that he wanted to go to the Federation. Whoosh! Whoosh! Dean transformed into a bird and flew out of the Imperial Palace with Goddess Wa. They flew straight towards the south of the Imperial capital. A few hours later, Dean and Goddess Wa crossed the God of War's wall and arrived at the Federation. Now, they didn't need to cross the God of War's wall through the sky. No one dared to obstruct them anymore. As soon as they arrived at the Federation, Dean directly landed in the capital. He released his perception and found that there was no shadow of the demonic insect spaceship in the capital. In addition, he also sensed Leslie's aura in the capital. The next moment, Dean appeared next to Leslie. Leslie was having a meeting in an office building to discuss the reform of the Federation system. At this time, Dean penetrated through the floor-to-ceiling window. He was like a ghost. Many people in the conference room were startled. Great Emperor! Leslie was stunned when he saw Dean. He quickly came forward to greet him. Why didn't you inform me in advance? I would have come to pick you up. No need. Is there any abnormality in the capital today? Dean said directly. Leslie's heart tightened as he saw Dean come in a hurry with a serious expression. It seemed that there was an important matter. He didn't continue to greet Dean. He thought for a moment and shook his head. There isn't any major event from the news reports. Which aspect are you referring to? Dean looked at Leslie. It seemed that nothing major had happened. Moreover, the blood moon had appeared today, so the demonic insect spaceship shouldn't have reached the Earth yet. Nothing. Dean shook his head and left the conference room. Leslie was stunned. He had no way to deal with Dean, who couldn't be seen. The other people in the conference room didn't dare to breathe. All of them had seen Dean before, so they knew the brutality of the Emperor. They didn't expect that he would come to such a small and medium-sized conference. Some of the people who were dozing off were so nervous that cold sweat came out. Their legs under the table couldn't help but tremble. Dean squinted his eyes as he looked at the sky. He was waiting for the arrival of the demonic insect spaceship. Dean thought that he would have to wait for a long time. But after 10 minutes, he saw several tiny black spots appear in the sky. They were getting bigger and bigger. It was the appearance of the demonic insect spaceship. It's coming. Dean looked at Goddess Wa. Get ready to fight. Goddess Wa laughed. Can we eat it? Let's eat it after we finish our business. Dean said. Oh, at this time, the spaceships were getting closer and closer. There were a total of 3 spaceships, and they were completely black. They looked like flying saucers, but there were sharp spikes protruding from their surfaces, making them look slightly sinister. In the blink of an eye, they appeared thousands of meters in the sky. The spaceships suddenly slowed down. It seemed that they had detected Dean and Goddess Wa, who were intercepting them. Not long after, the spaceship stopped a few hundred meters above the two of them. The valves of the spaceship opened, and 4 snow-white polar ice worm kings flew out. Their bodies were chubby, but they had 2 pairs of translucent wings on their backs. They flapped their wings as they flew over like flying snakes. Take him away, one of the extreme ice insect kings said in the devil insect language, its voice sounding like it was hissing. The other 3 ice worm kings immediately surrounded Dean and Dudian. Dean raised his eyebrows as he looked at their posture. He didn't resist, as it would save him from attacking the outer shell of the spaceship. Asang mobile phone. Chapter 1244. 3 ice worm kings spat out cold air and froze Dean and Goddess Wa's bodies. They turned into 2 ice sculptures. The ice worms flew up and wrapped them up. They dragged them back to the valve of the spaceship and entered the spaceship. Whoosh! The valve of the spaceship closed, and the sound of air flow echoed out. The internal structure of this spaceship was not like the long corridors of human spaceships. Instead, it was a staircase structure like a beehive with a large number of entrances and exits. The walls were not made of gleaming metal, but dark red walls that had a very textured texture. There were protruding things that looked like blood vessels, like the internal organs of insects. The lighting was incomparably dim, and one could occasionally hear some slippery movements, like some kind of animal was crawling. Dean and God of Wa were dragged to the center of the spaceship. There was an ovarian throne in the center of the spaceship. It was very spacious. There were tentacles extending from the ground to the throne. There was a long white worm inside the throne. It seemed like it had hair. Its skin was a bit wrinkled. The ice worm king that led Dean and God of Wa into the spaceship hissed in insect language, "Great sage, they are two earthlings. One of them has the smell of origami. Do you want to dissect them?" In this, it used an honorific similar to the insect language, but it was omitted in the translation. Dean's understanding of the insect language came from Lin Chongqing's memory. Lin Chongqing wasn't an insect after all, although he was able to communicate with insects, but he didn't understand some of the rare languages. Dean's body remained stiff and didn't move, but his pupils slightly contracted as he scanned the entire spaceship. He focused on the old ice insect on the throne of ovaries. According to Lin Chongqing's memory, the ice worm was one of the 12 sages that had come to the Federation twice. Lin Chongqing had given the ice worm its name. Its body is mixed with origami genes. It has a demigod physique. Unfortunately, it doesn't have an absolute and precise balance like God of Wa. Dean's eyes flashed as he saw through the gene structure of the ice worm. The moon demon bug on the throne looked at the two frozen humans. Suddenly, it stood up from its crouching position. It looked like it was looking down on the whole spaceship. Two red slits appeared on its forehead, like two narrow and sharp ruby eyes. After staring at the two for a moment, its expression suddenly changed. It rolled its body and shouted angrily, "Kill them quick!" The surrounding guards were surprised as they didn't understand why the great sage was so nervous. But they unconditionally obeyed the order. They mobilized a large amount of cold air and turned it into icicles and spears. Bang! Bang! Two ice sculptures suddenly exploded, and ice chips splashed. Dean shook off the ice chips on his cuffs. His eyes flashed, and a high temperature was instantly released from his body. It turned into several fireballs that submerged the ice spears and ice swords that were attacking from all directions. Hiss! The surrounding demonic insects were shocked and looked at the two humans in disbelief. They were frozen and imprisoned, but they could actually undo the ice seal on their own. One demigod and the rest are king level. More than 30 kings and hundreds of abyss. It's enough to flatten the bases of the Federation and the Empire. Dean indifferently glanced around. His eyes fell on the sage. It seems that you have mastered the demigod experiment. It's a pity that you used it on an insect. The moon monster was shocked. It was sure that it wasn't hallucinating. It spoke in the Federation language. "Who are you? The Emperor of the Empire? You even know about the Empire. It seems that everything on Earth is under your control." Dean slightly raised his eyebrows. "Unfortunately, I'm the one who should ask questions, not you." Then, he turned to Goddess Wa and said, "Catch it. I want its memory, and the rest will be your snack." Clapping her hands excitedly, Goddess Wa said, "Great." Her figure flashed and disappeared. She appeared in front of the moon monster. Her fingers turned into a large number of silver threads that shrouded the moon monster. The moon demon bug was already prepared when she attacked, but it was still frightened by this terrifying speed. In a hurry, it turned into a sharp white sword and cut off the silver threads. It quickly retreated and retreated back into the throne of ovaries. There was a huge corridor inside the throne, which was connected to all parts of the spaceship. God of Wa had seen through it. She didn't do anything, but a large number of sharp blades and white threads came out of the corridor and forced the moon monster out. The white threads had penetrated the ground of the spaceship through her feet. They were waiting in the corridor. The other insects screamed as they saw the great sage was in trouble. The entire spaceship was filled with cold air. Too hard is easy to break. Too soft is easy to fly. Dean couldn't help but sigh as he thought of the old saying. Ice Monster and Flame Monster were extremely powerful. Unfortunately, they were too easy to restrain, and their weaknesses were too obvious. It was no wonder that they had to fuse with each other in order to become a god. God of War was surrounded by many insects. Her body was shrouded in cold air, and it was difficult to see her. Dean didn't plan to help. This was a good opportunity for God of War to train. He saw that although God of War was a true god, she lacked training and experience. Her huge potential hadn't been fully displayed yet. The fierce battle ended after a few minutes. The cold air was dispersed by a gust of wind. God of War's body was covered with sharp blades. Each blade was covered with different abilities such as fire, ice, petrification, darkness, poison, and so on. Her image was extremely terrifying. Even the evil gods and myths and legends couldn't compare to her. The bodies of the insects were scattered on the ground. They were slowly crawling and reforming their bodies. She was holding a mass of white mucus in her huge claws. It was the moon monster. Dean breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that the moon magic worm had been subdued by her, he quickly released his tentacles and plunged them into its body. He assimilated with its cells and read its memory. 10 minutes later, Dean retracted his tentacles. His face was a little gloomy. In this memory, he saw the growth of this moon magic insect. It was originally a source insect born from an ice pool. Because of the excessive cold energy in its body, it formed a cold bead, making it the sage of the ice magic insect clan. All sages were born with it. After becoming a sage, it displayed extraordinary intelligence. It took over the military power from its teacher and led its bloodline of ice demon insects into battle. They fought against the flame demon insects and other sages, seizing territory. The environment of the devil insect planet was harsh. The living environment was very precious. The competition was extremely fierce. It was like a meat grinder killing a large number of demon insects. Because of this, the number of demon insects was controlled. Otherwise, the planet might not be able to contain all the demon insects. In the hundreds of years of fighting, its life was very monotonous. It was fighting and killing every day. The demon insects didn't have any entertainment like humans. In the hundreds of years, it also experienced the disaster of the demon insects. The origami came and killed the demon insects for food. Every time the origami came, it was like the end of the world for the demon insects. The origami's terrifying digestive ability restrained the demon insects, making them unable to resist. Just like the humans on Earth, they couldn't resist the origami's arrival, until many sages discussed and opened a new path of survival. They gathered a large number of elites and embarked on an interstellar journey. Then they found Earth. Here, they saw the key to becoming a god and eternal life. That was humans. They analyzed the physique of humans. It was completely different from them. It was very balanced and was the most suitable vessel. For this reason, they began to modify humans to create the perfect vessel. After all, although the original humans were very suitable materials, their physique was weak. It was like a tree with small branches that needed to be polished. When humans resisted, the global nuclear bomb exploded. Nearly half of the great sages were killed. The rest fled in panic. It was also one of the few sages who survived. It led its defeated army to evacuate Earth. But not long after it evacuated, it received a signal from the surviving warriors in the area. It knew the situation on Earth, so it came again. This time, Earth was beyond recognition. There were only a few human survivors. They captured the human survivors, raised them, dissected them, and used them as experimental materials. Other than that, they also tried to study the culture and technology of humans on Earth. They wanted to understand why humans were so weak but could create such terrifying things. So, this base gradually expanded from the initial slaughterhouse to the current Federation. Speaking of this, there was one more thing to add. When it first returned to Earth, it was not just the moon demon insect. There were 5 great sages from the ice demon insect clan. There were also 4 or 5 flame demon insects. It was not very clear about the details. After investigating the situation on Earth, they were relieved and made a plan to experiment on Earth. Chapter 1245. Not long after the plan was made, the origami race, who were also scared away by the nuclear bomb, appeared on Earth. Using the unique technology of the origami race, they divided their territory. At that time, they were thousands of kilometers away from the ice demon bug research base. They built tombs and buried the warriors of the origami race who died in battle. Similarly, the people who survived in that area were also raised by the origami race. The sages of the Flame Magic Bug clan were not willing to fall behind after they knew about the plan of the Ice Magic Bug clan. They quickly circled a large area and divided the territory. Then they arrested the survivors in the area and allowed them to breed and bring more fresh experimental bodies. This action caused the population to expand rapidly. The Flame Magic Bug clan needed endless experimental materials. In order to make it easier to manage, they were allowed to form a country according to the culture of the old era. They became the controller behind the scenes. There was a lack of culture in the past. With the permission of the sages of the Flame Magic Bug clan, they opened up a part of the culture. This made the Fire Dragon country become the first land country. The Ice Magic Bug clan and the Origami clan saw the benefits and convenience in it, so they adopted the same model. So it formed the situation where the 3 major forces confronted each other. From a general point of view, it wasn't complicated. It went from simple to complicated. But the bloody changes in the middle were unbearable and unimaginable for humans. During that dark period, humans were once reduced to livestock. What was livestock? Clothes didn't cover the body. Everyone was naked. They slept with corpses. They ate raw meat and drank dirty water. They didn't care about beauty or dignity. Dean was curious as to why the Origami and the Flame Magic Bug clan didn't live on Earth. The answer was found in the memory of the Moon Magic Bug clan. At the beginning of the nuclear explosion, the Earth was covered with nuclear dust. Volcanoes occurred frequently. The land was barren and the environment was extremely harsh. Although the Flame Magic Bug clan was tenacious and could adapt to various environments, it wasn't good for their bodies to adapt forcefully. It was like everyone could starve for a few days without eating. But it wasn't good for the body. The Ice Magic Bug clan liked the cold and icy environment. The Flame Magic Bug clan liked the hot and warm environment. The temperature difference between day and night was huge. One moment it was snowing, and the next moment it was volcanic eruption. For the demon insects, they could adapt to swamps that were full of methane, and they could also adapt to living underwater. They could even adapt to the lack of oxygen and could survive for a long time in an environment lacking oxygen. However, the change in temperature was the most uncomfortable for them. Their body's ability to adjust temperature was almost zero. At that time, the Earth's environment was like humans in the extreme cold of the North Pole. They should be thankful that they didn't freeze to death. From the experimental base to the formation of the Federation, humanity had been restored to civilization and order under their control for 30 years. During these 30 years, the number of origin bugs that had died due to the strange diseases caused by environmental factors numbered more than 10. There was also a great sage who had also contracted a strange disease. His entire body was covered in extremely itchy hot spots, and he wailed in pain every day. He was unable to think at all, let alone continue with his experiments. Meanwhile, the flame demon bugs on the other side weren't much better off. They quickly understood each other's intentions. After all, they were of the same race, and they had hated each other for countless years. They understood each other extremely well. In order to survive, they had to discuss and finally decided to leave Earth. However, the premise of making this decision was to pull the Wildness God clan into this. Otherwise, leaving the Wildness God clan on Earth would be too dangerous for their forces. Although the Wildness God clan was not afraid of the Demon Bug clan, the secret to becoming a god was in the hands of the demon bug clan. The Wildness God clan's research progress was the slowest. In the end, they agreed to this agreement after exchanging a large amount of precious information. Before the three parties left Earth, they left some of their clansmen on Earth to continue supervising the experiments. They changed their way of thinking and secretly led the development of human science and technology. They let humans study humans themselves. The situation on Earth gradually stabilized. The nuclear dust clouds and volcanoes brought by the nuclear bombs gradually calmed down. Humans multiplied in the three major forces. In just 100 years, they had developed to a large scale. The nature of humans was exposed in the comfortable environment. They pursued more and more things. Coupled with the technology that they had mastered, they had picked up the lost civilization from the old era. Although humans had gradually restored the appearance of the old era, the highest ruling decisions were still in the hands of the demon bug and the origami. They were still under their surveillance. Therefore, in the imperial capital that was under the control of the demon emperor, the development of science and technology was forbidden within the giant wall. Only in the imperial capital that was under the control of the demon emperor could there be the shadow of science and technology. Even if there were any horrible and destructive things that were developed, they could be stopped in time. The empire prohibits the development of science and technology. The three major forces had an agreement that they would not invade each other. That's why there were fewer frictions at the border in the early days. Later on, there were more and more conflicts. It's estimated that it was because of the long time. They wanted to test the effectiveness of the agreement. It's ridiculous that they attacked each other and sacrificed humans. Dean looked at the memory of the moon magic insect. He felt that humans were extremely sad in the past 300 years. The most ridiculous and ironic thing was that humans were living a comfortable life in the increasingly perfect order. They were pursuing food, quality of life, entertainment, and so on. They were unaware that they were under surveillance. According to Dean's understanding, even if they were aware of it, it was estimated that most of them wouldn't care about it. After all, the perfect order had already divided them into 3, 6, or 9 ranks. Everyone had to struggle for a living. They couldn't care about the things in front of them. In addition, Dean saw Lin Chongsheng in the memory of the moon magic insect. But what surprised him was that Lin Chongsheng escaped from the experiment. In addition to Lin Chongsheng's own will, it was also the tacit consent of the moon magic insect. The biggest experimental subject of the Federation was Lin Chongsheng himself. Lin Chongsheng thought that he escaped from the hands of the demon bug with his intelligence. He didn't know that all of this was under the surveillance of the moon magic insect. Lin Chongsheng was the experimental subject that they had high hopes for. He was the most likely to become a god. And the most important thing was that this experimental subject would complete the experiment on his body. When the experiment was about to be completed, all they needed to do was to pick him up. Every time the blood moon and the demon bug arrived, Lin Chongsheng would erase all traces of himself. Now it seemed that he was playing hide and seek in front of the monitor. It was a bit ridiculous and sad. This time the demon emperor is attacking the Federation and conspiring with the fire dragon country. Maybe the origami and the flame magic insect are colluding with each other. The ice magic insect clan knew about it. That's why they came to the Earth in advance. The original agreement is only in name now. The moment the demon emperor raised his troops to attack the Federation, it has been torn. Dean suddenly felt that the demon emperor's attack on the Federation wasn't that simple. The demon emperor knew about the existence of Lin Chongsheng. He wanted to attack the Federation and become a god himself. But in the process, no other origami appeared to help him. It made people speculate that the demon emperor wanted to hide from the origami and snatch the fruit to become a god himself. 3_3610/ You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.